Hello, listeners. Welcome back to another chilling episode. If you have your own terrifying experience to share, please mail us to be featured in our next episode. So before we dive in, please subscribe to our small channel and leave a comment, letting me know which country you are listening from. So without further ado, let's begin the story. If I'm being honest, I didn't even remember Uncle Cal existed until the lawyer called. It was a Thursday afternoon. One of those overcast Pennsylvania days where the sky looks like wet concrete and everything feels muffled. I was at work, slouched in the back office of a strip mall medical supply shop, doing my usual combination of fake inventory and scrolling Reddit when my phone buzzed. The call was from a local number in Woodbury, my hometown, a place I hadn't set foot in. Since high school, I picked up the voice on the other end was clipped, formal, and to the point. "Miss Halden," says Walter Brindley, handling the estate of Calvin Halden. "He's named you as next of kin." I remember blinking, then saying the first thing that came to mind. Who? Looking back, though, I should have known better. My mom never liked talking about her brother. Whenever I asked about him, she just said, "He's not someone you need to worry about," and changed the subject. Even when we visited Woodbury for holidays, we never went near his side of town. I thought maybe he was just the weird one in the family, the kind of guy who wears 3 coats in July and talks to himself in the grocery store. But now I had a lawyer telling me I was the sole beneficiary of his estate, including his house, personal effects, and something referred to only as archival media. The drive up was quiet, gray, and wet. The GPS kept rerouting as I got closer, which wasn't unusual for rural Pennsylvania, but still put me on edge. The roads were narrower than I remembered, like the trees had crept closer while no one was watching. Woodbury hadn't changed much. Same brick library, same gas station, same sagging neon sign outside Mick Quaid's Hardware. But as I turned onto Bramble Hollow Lane, the street where Cal's house sat, I felt it. That weight. Like the air itself was trying to push me back. The house was a squat. One-story thing with flaking green paint and ivy that had long since claimed the porch. There was yellow tape across the front steps police line, though it was brittle and snapped the second I touched it. Brindley met me at the door, gray-suited and dry as a bone, handing over a manila envelope and a ring of tarnished keys. "Everything's in order," he said. "You're free to dispose of the property however you see fit." He didn't step inside, just turned and walked away like he'd been waiting for an excuse to get off that porch. Inside it smelled like old paper and forgotten electronics, piles of cassette tapes, VHS stacks, radios with wires spilling out like guts. It was less a home and more a bunker built around a single obsession. In the back room, the one with the boarded-up windows, I found a dusty TV with a built-in VCR still plugged into the wall. Next to it sat a box labeled Emergency Alert Tests, Personal Copy. I should have just walked away, but I didn't. That night, I crashed on the old couch. Not because I was comfortable, but because I was too wired to sleep in the motel. I remember staring at the TV, wondering if the tape inside would even play. I hadn't touched a VCR since middle school, but around 2:14 a.m. something happened. The TV flickered to life on its own. No static, no channel. Just a black screen and the high-pitched beep of an emergency alert system test. Then text rolled across the screen. "Seek shelter. The girl is near." It looked exactly like a real alert. Same font, same tone, same slow. Scroll, but no voice, no call letters, no weather map. Just that sentence repeating again and again. I turned the TV off. Then it turned itself back on. The next morning was sharp and gray, with a wind that never seemed to stop scraping at the windows. I made instant coffee in a cracked ceramic mug I found under the sink and forced myself to stay in that house longer than I wanted. I had told myself I'd give it 1 weekend, just long enough to look through Cal's things, find anything valuable, and make plans to sell. But that alert from the night before, it clung to me. Not just in memory, but physically. I kept thinking I heard the beep echoing in the vents. That high tone from the emergency alert system, I swear it came from somewhere inside the walls. I started with the back room, the one that had been sealed up with plywood from the inside. It wasn't big, maybe 10 by 12 feet. The wallpaper had peeled away in curls, revealing layers beneath hold. Floral patterns, water-stained insulation, and writing. Literal writing on the wall in red marker. Short notes, dates, and fragments of sentences like 11:04 she passed through, and don't play the warning twice. There were 6 old TVs in that room, none newer than 1995, all hooked up to different machines, VCRs, cassette decks. Even what looked like a shortwave radio wired through an old amplifier. And in the center of the room sat a low table with a stack of binders. I flipped through one of them and found page after page of hand-typed transcriptions. Every entry was titled EAS Error, Local Warnings. The earliest was dated 1987. The latest, 2011, and every single one included the phrase, "The girl is near." I'll skip the boring stuff like cataloging the equipment or sorting the unlabeled VHS tapes. Most of them were garbage weather reports, static, church broadcasts taped, over commercials. But then I found one labeled simply WRN for 21991. It was a Betamax, not VHS, which meant dragging the entire shelf out of the closet to find the right machine. When I finally got it hooked up, the footage was low quality, but clear enough to recognize a live channel broadcast.
Ow.
Late night news from Woodbury's long-defunct Channel 8. The anchor was halfway through a segment on a local school board dispute. When the screen cut to black, no transition. Just sudden silence, then the tone. That high-pitched emergency alert beep that never fails to raise every hair on your neck. It held for exactly 10 seconds. Then the screen displayed the same text. I saw the night before. Seek shelter. The girl is near. This time, though, there was audio. Not narration, something else. A voice low and distant, almost like it had been recorded in another room. Not mechanical like the typical alerts. This one breathed. She watches the ones who ignore the warning. Screen went black again, then cut back to the news, as if nothing had happened. The anchor didn't even blink. Just kept talking about tax referendums and county school budgets. I sat there for a long time after that, just watching the empty screen, replaying that moment again and again, trying to figure out if it was a hoax or some kind of prank from the station. But when I looked up WRN Channel 8, I found something odd. The station had gone off the air in 1992 after a fire in their server. Room destroyed most of their archival footage. The fire, I found out later, started during a thunderstorm. The same night, a local family was found dead in their home, no signs of injury, good doors locked from the inside, and terrified expressions on all their faces. 3 days later, the same. Emergency alert aired again. I didn't sleep that night, not because of the house, but because when I went to unplug the TV, I found something tucked behind it, a printed email, yellow with age. It was from a man named Malcolm Grady sent to Cal in 2008. It read, "If you see the girl on screen, cover the mirrors. Do not watch the forecast again, no matter what it says." And below that, scribbled in Cal's handwriting, were 3 words in all caps. Does she follow? That night, something changed. Not just in the house, but in me. I told myself it was just being back in Woodbury. The smell of mold and old electronics pressing in on my lungs. And the flood of memories I thought I'd buried under years of ignoring family phone calls. But it wasn't that. It wasn't nostalgia. It was the feeling that I was being watched from inside the static. It started with the power flickers. At first, just minor lights dimming. A soft click from the living room lamp that I figured was faulty wiring. This was an old house, after all, barely held together with cobwebs and rust. But the flickers weren't random. They always came just as I was about to shut off a TV, or right when I stepped into a new room, like the house was. Reacting, like it knew where I was at all times. I should have known better, but I kept digging. I went back through Cal's binders, focusing on anything marked after 2004. That's when the weather alerts changed, got shorter, less official. The tones would sometimes play without any follow-up message. And then there was the incident. I'd forgotten until I saw it written down again, the town-wide emergency broadcast in 2011. It happened on a Tuesday, during a thunderstorm. A message interrupted regular programming on every local channel. No audio, just text. Seek shelter. The girl is near. I was a teenager then. Remembered my mom yelling at me to unplug the TV. I thought it was just some glitch, like those weird test pattern stations sometimes used to run. But in Cal's notes, he wrote something different. 3 dead within 48 hours. All found soaked, indoors, doors locked, mirror damage in each home. Broadcast lasted 44 seconds. Town never acknowledged it. Been typing that. Now makes my stomach turn, because that night, after I read the entry, I went to the bathroom and found my own mirror cracked. Not shattered, just a jagged, twisting line running from top to bottom, like it had been scored with a nail. And here's the thing. It hadn't been like that earlier. I would have noticed. I'd used it that morning to brush my teeth, I told. Myself it was heat damage. Or age. But when I looked closer, there were droplets. Water, like condensation. But not from steam. From something else. Then came the footsteps. I heard them just after midnight, soft and deliberate, moving down. The hall toward the back room. I was lying on the couch again, wrapped in a blanket I found in the closet, holding Cal's flashlight like a weapon. I stayed perfectly still, breath caught in my throat. The footsteps weren't heavy like a man's. They were light, barefoot, like a child walking on cold tile. They stopped right at the edge of the hallway where the carpet met the wood. I couldn't see anything, but I swear I could feel her standing there, not watching, waiting. I stayed like that for hours, eyes locked on the corner of the room. The next day, the static started. The radios all buzzed the same low hum regardless of the station or setting. Even my phone started acting up. No calls would go through, and every time I tried to play music, the speaker let out that same high-pitched tone from the emergency system. The girl. She wasn't just part of the warning. She was the warning, and I had already seen her. Even if I didn't know it yet, the next morning, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Whatever was happening in that house and, maybe in the town around it, wasn't random. The mirror, the broadcast, the footsteps. I'd reached that uncomfortable place where you start talking to yourself out loud, just to hear a normal voice. I found myself asking empty rooms things like, "What do you want?" and "Why me?" The air didn't answer, but I felt the pressure, building in it. So I drove to the Woodbury Library. It was only half a mile from Cal's house, but I hadn't been there in over a decade. The parking lot was cracked, 2 of the streetlights bent at awkward angles. The building looked exactly as I remembered, except quieter, like it had been waiting in some kind of sleep mode since the last time I left it inside the librarian. At the front desk glanced at me with that polite small-town suspicion, but didn't ask questions. I found the microfilm records buried in the back corner. Same machine, same smell of hot dust. I wasn't sure what I was even looking for at first, just following a hunch that if Cal had been tracking this girl for decades, then someone else must have noticed her too. What I found made my skin crawl in an old Woodbury Gazette from October 1983. I came across a report of unusual deaths following a late-night storm. 3 residents found dead in their homes, doors locked from the inside, no cause of death found. No signs of trauma except for severe facial expressions of terror. All 3 were reported to have suffered mirror fractures in there. Bedrooms. That term mirror fractures kept popping up again and again in the years that followed. Always tied to storms. Always paired with whispers of bad signals or strange TV behavior the night before. I dug deeper. In 1991, the towns. Church held a closed-door meeting after a girl was spotted standing in the middle of Highway 9 during a thunderstorm. She was soaking wet. Her eyes reportedly rolled back in her head, and when someone tried to help her, she simply vanished. The only person who ever spoke about it afterward was the priest Father Raymond Klein. He retired the next year and left town immediately. No interviews. No forwarding address. Back at Cal's house, I went through another one of his binders. This one filled with clippings, Polaroids, and what looked like hand-typed transcripts from shortwave intercepts. One photo showed a TV screen with a blurry weather alert frozen mid-sentence. "Do not look at her. Do not look back." Another was a list of names. Some were circled. Others were crossed out. My mom's name was on that list, circled then. Scribbled out so violently the paper had torn. That's when it hit me. Cal hadn't just been watching this thing. He'd been tracking victims. There were tapes, too. I finally got the courage to play a few more only during the day, never at night. One tape, marked Wendy Final, was just 20 seconds long. It started with rain. Then a soft, almost childish voice saying, "You left the window open." And then ... nothing. That was when I started covering the mirrors. Not because of the tape, but because that evening, as I was walking past the bathroom, I saw something impossible. My reflection moved, but I didn't. It smiled. By the fifth night, I had unplugged every television in the house. Didn't matter, the screen still turned on. Sometimes with static, sometimes black, and just once with the emergency. Alert message burned faintly into the glass, like an afterimage that never cleared. Seek shelter. The girl is near. I started stacking heavy books in front of the TVs, taping sheets over mirrors, sleeping in full clothing with my boots on. I wasn't living anymore, I was hiding. And hiding badly. The worst part was the weather. It changed suddenly, without warning, and never matched the forecasts. One night, I fell asleep to silence, and woke to what I thought was the soft hiss of static. But it wasn't. It was rain inside the house.
A light mist hung in.
The hallway beating gently on the doorknobs and leaving damp footprints on the carpet. I followed them, barefoot and shaking, only to find them leading to my room, not from it. As if someone or something had come in during the night and just stood there, watching me. I called the sheriff's office. Again, I told them I believed. Someone was breaking in, that someone might be trying to scare me off the property. The deputy on the line was polite but tired. "Miss Halden," he said, "Cal used to call us every month with stories about the girl in the static. You sure you're not just working yourself up being back in that house?" When I pushed harder, he grew cold. "There's nothing illegal." "About rain and bad dreams," he said. "That property is yours now. Whatever's happening there, ... is your problem?" I hung up, my hands trembling. Looking back, though, I should have known better than to expect help. Cal hadn't either. His journals weren't the rantings of a madman. They were warnings, instructions, and one page stood. Out among them, buried near the back of his last notebook, a checklist. When the alert repeats, it read, "Cover the mirrors, hate the windows. Do not answer if she knocks. Ignore her voice. The dead sound like us." That was the first night I heard the knocking. It was light, almost polite. It's just 3 short. Taps on the front door at exactly 2:11 a.m. I stood frozen. It's breathing through my mouth. Flashlight pointed at the floor. Then came the whisper. Faint, childlike, and somehow inside the house, even though I hadn't moved. "You forgot the attic," it said. I didn't even know there was an attic. But I checked the hallway and found it right above the linen closet. The pull-down ladder had dust on it, but the hatch itself was clean, like it had been opened recently. Like someone had just gone a pour down. I didn't sleep after that. The next day I packed a bag. I told myself I'd leave that night, drive until I hit somewhere with traffic, noise, people. But then the alert came again. This time not from the house, from my phone. Despite having no cell signal and no apps running, the screen lit up at 3:08 p.m. with a system notification I couldn't swipe away. "Seek shelter. The girl is near." That's when it hit me. She wasn't tied to the tapes or the house. She was tied to me. I wish I could say I handled it well, that I stayed calm and logical. But I didn't. After the alert appeared on my phone, I threw it into the sink and ran the tap until it shorted out, sizzling and cracking like an insect under glass. I packed my bag for the second time, this time determined not to hesitate. But just as I reached for the keys on the counter, I noticed something chilling. They were wet, not just damp, but dripping, like they'd been pulled from a pool. And the faintest smell of ozone filled the air. That's when I lost it. I tore through the house, flipping over every drawer, every box of tapes, every journal Cal left behind. I wasn't just trying to escape, I was trying to understand. I needed something, anything, that might explain what she was or how to make it stop. At the bottom of a filing cabinet I hadn't touched yet, beneath layers of rusted batteries and warped cassette cases, I found a thick folder labeled Interference in Cal's tight block handwriting. Inside were letters, dozens of them, some typed, some handwritten, all addressed to the same person. Dr. Elisa Martian, FCC, Unofficial Division. Most had been returned unopened, but one letter had a response. It was short. Scrawled in pencil on lined notebook paper, Cal, stop recording. Every time you document the alert, it pulls her closer. These messages aren't warnings, they're invitations. It's not the static that's haunted, it's the silence in between. There was no signature. But the envelope it came in was postmarked 3 days before the 2011 incident, the one I remembered from my teenage years. The one where people died. Cal must have known. And still, he kept recording. I didn't know what else to do, so I drove back to the library. There was a woman there I vaguely remembered from high school, Tina McCready, now working behind the reference desk. It must have looked like hell, because she raised an eyebrow before I even spoke. Tina, I said, do you remember the broadcast in 2011? The one that said the girl is near? Her face went pale. She didn't say a word. For several seconds, then she reached under the desk and pulled out a small radio. A really old one, the kind you crank by hand. She turned the dial until it caught a frequency, just static at first, then a voice. The girl is near. Cover the mirrors. She turned. It off. You need to get out of town, she whispered. Now don't tell anyone where you're going. Don't take any pictures. Never watch a weather forecast again. I asked her why. Shh. She didn't answer. Said she. Can't find you if no one knows where you are. I drove back to the house one last time that night. I don't even know why. Maybe part of me needed closure. Or maybe I was just afraid that running would mean she'd follow me forever. I burned most of the tapes in the backyard. The smell was foul, like melted plastic and spoiled meat. The flames hissed, almost seemed to resist the fire at first. Then for the first time in days, the air felt still, empty. I dared to think maybe I'd done it, and maybe destroying the physical media would sever the connection. But when I went back inside, all the mirrors were uncovered, and my reflection. It wasn't me. I left Woodbury the next morning. Didn't pack properly. Didn't even lock the house. Just got in my car and drove until the trees thinned out. The roads turned wide and smooth, and the air stopped smelling like mildew and ash. I didn't look in the rearview mirror once. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't speak. I just drove, hands clenched on the wheel, half expecting to see her standing in the middle of the road at some blind curve, soaking wet, staring straight. Through the windshield, I ended up in Ohio, rented a room under a fake name, paid cash, and started pretending I was someone else. Someone who didn't believe in cursed alerts or ghosts with drowned eyes. For a few months, I thought it might have worked. The dreams got quieter. I stopped seeing her face in reflections, but I never turned the TV back on. Not once. When it rained, I'd sit in the bathtub with a blanket over my head, trying not to breathe too loud. Because the thing no one ever tells you about being haunted is how quiet it gets. No jump scares, no screaming, just silence. The kind that presses against your ribs and makes it hard to think. Looking back, though, I should have known it wasn't over, that it never really ends. Because the girl in the weather alert isn't just a spirit or a glitch or an urban legend. She's a pattern. A warning that becomes real when too many people notice. And now that I've said all this, written it down, told someone else, afraid I've passed it on, it started again last week. I was in a motel off Route 33, trying to sleep with the lights on, when the power blinked. Just once. Then the TV in the room across the hall clicked on through the wall. I heard it. The unmistakable beep of the emergency alert system, 3 tones. Then the static. Then her voice. She didn't say the usual phrase. This time it was different. She whispered something new, just for me. You never covered the attic. The next morning, the motel manager told me the guest in that room checked out in the middle of the night, but left the TV on, turned all the way up, playing only snow. I asked if he'd looked in the mirror in that room. He said no, but I did later. I crept in when no one was watching, and the mirror cracked. Now I hear her sometimes. In thunderstorms, not full sentences, Just breaths, like she's getting closer again, or maybe she never left. My phone, even when off, still vibrates at 3:08 a.m. once a week. No screen lighting up. No message, just that silent buzz that feels like a heart murmur under your pillow. I don't know how much longer I can avoid her, or if it even matters anymore, because a few days ago, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, no stamp. Just a single line written in Cal's old typewriter font. The warning is for the ones who listen. You listened. So I'm telling you this not to scare you, but to warn you. If you ever see that alert in TV online, your phone, don't read it aloud. Don't share it. And whatever you do, don't look at her face. Because once you see her, you don't unsee her. And she never forgets. I should have walked away the second I saw the posting. It was on a bulletin board outside a rundown gas station, somewhere along Route 22, just past Oneonta. Plain white paper, typed text, no graphics, no company name, just a header that read, "Field audio technician needed, night shift urgent." First, it was weirdly short. Said the job involved monitoring and documenting anomalous audio signatures at a privately managed geological site. That was it. No details about pay, no HR contact, just a number, handwritten at the bottom. But the timing was awful. I'd just been laid off from a broadcast editing job at a small-town AM station. My rent was already late, and my truck was running on prayers and a cracked fuel line. I had no real options left, and something about the wording got under my skin. Anomalous audio signatures, it sounded important. Scientific, maybe, like it had weight, or at least enough of a paycheck to float me through another month. When I called the number, a man answered on the second ring. Didn't say his name, just asked if I had experience with field recorders, long-range parabolic mics, and signal filtering. I said yes, though honestly I'd only ever used a parabolic mic once at a college football game. He didn't seem to care, said the job was urgent. Said they'd lost a guy last week and needed someone on site by Friday. Then he gave me directions, not an address. Just mile markers and landmark sand hung up before I could ask about housing, insurance, or even what exactly I'd be recording. I should have been suspicious. But desperation does something to your thinking. It makes danger look like mystery, makes sketchy jobs seem like adventures. So I packed my gears, Zoom, H4n, Sony headphones, a few SD cards, and my old toolbox, and headed north. The quarry was deeper in the woods than I expected. I followed a gravel service road that curved sharply around a hill and dipped down into a narrow canyon filled with overgrown weeds and rusted-out trucks. There were no fences, no warning signs, just a small concrete office near the base of a massive rock wall, and a trailer with a crooked porch light that flickered even in daylight. Inside the office, a guy in a red Carhartt jacket introduced himself as Mitch. He didn't shake my hand, just handed me a laminated badge and a thick folder with the words GHA Protocol stamped on the front. "You'll be on the midnight shift," he said. 12 to 8. Don't wander outside the marked perimeter. And if you hear it, anything that sounds like talking, you record it. But don't respond. Ever. I must have looked confused, because he sighed and added, "You'll get used to it. If you're smart, you'll keep your head down, follow the checklist, and ignore the weird shit." The pay wasn't even that great, 16 an hour cash, but I didn't care. Just needed to stop bleeding money. That first night I sat in the tiny monitoring shack with a headset on, scanning frequencies and sipping bad coffee. The quarry stretched out in front of me like a dead crater, with nothing but mist and stone and broken fence posts. I thought it would be boring, but at 2:13 a.m. I heard something. Not wind, not rocks falling. A voice that said, my name. The next morning, well, technically the afternoon. Since I didn't sleep until the sun was fully up, I tried to get a better look at the operation. Mitch wasn't around, but a woman named Carmen was sweeping the walkway outside the office, and she gave me a nod when I approached. Carmen was probably in her late 40s, wore a security badge, and had the kind of posture that screamed ex-military, or don't ask questions. I tried to ease into conversation, asked how long she'd been working the quarry. Her answer was dry, long enough to know not to ask what happened to the last guy. That should have been enough to make me walk. but I needed the money. So I asked about my shift, what I was supposed to actually do beyond recording. She just stared for a second and said, "You sit, you listen, you write down the weird. If the weird says your name, you stay silent. If it knocks, you don't open the door. If it gets too quiet, you get out. That's it. No training. Safety manual. No standard orientation. Just vague warnings wrapped in deadpan delivery." I spent that afternoon reading through the binder Mitch had given me. The GHA protocol. It was a mess of redacted paragraphs, badly photocopied maps of the quarry's layout, and hand-scrawled notes in the margins that looked like someone had written them while panicking. Most pages repeated the same instruction. No vocal responses, document only. There were whole sections about decibel levels, frequency spikes, and something they called resonance events. Apparently, if the ambient quarry audio exceeded 92 decibels without a clear source, I was to press a button labeled Mark, log the time, and leave the shack immediately. It sounded like pseudoscience, or a prank, until I found the list. Of names, workers. All dated. Some were crossed out in thick black marker. A few had transfers scribbled beside them, but most just said non-responsive. Didn't understand what that meant yet. That night, my second shift started at midnight sharp. Was more alert this time. Had my headset adjusted and my notes ready. The shack had a wall of audio gear that felt decades out of date analog dials, thick wires, and a portable recorder with 2 labeled tapes already inside. The mic was mounted outside, pointed at the center of the quarry. Static buzzed constantly, like the place was never truly silent. Carmen dropped off a thermos of coffee without a word and left me alone at first. It was nothing. Low wind, occasional rustle of small rocks, a dog barking somewhere distant. But then, just after 1:40 a.m., something strange happened. The mic picked up what sounded like a conversation, not close, faint, like people speaking in the distance. I leaned in, adjusted the Ganand froze. One of the voices sounded exactly like me. Not just similar. Identical. Same pacing, same little pauses between words. I had a flash memory of saying something the night before, something to myself, when I first sat down. And now, I was hearing. It again replayed, echoed from the quarry. I hit record and logged the moment, but I didn't press the mark button. I hadn't heard anything loud or dangerous, just unsettling. At 2:13 a.m., right on cue, the voice came again, closer this time. No words, just my name, whispered once. I stayed completely still, holding my breath. Then I remembered what Carmen said. If it gets too quiet, get out. And suddenly, the static on the line cut completely. For a full 10 seconds, there was nothing, not even the hum of the monitors. I hit mark and backed out of the shack without even grabbing my bag. Whatever they were paying MIT wasn't enough. By my third shift, the rules stopped feeling like suggestions and started to feel more like superstitions, only the kind where not following them meant someone ended up dead. I still hadn't seen Mitch again, and Carmen had grown noticeably colder. Drop off coffee without making eye contact, and when I asked questions, she'd brush them off with lines like "don't poke at things that look back" or "some echoes are bait." It was around then I started realizing how little of this operation was official. There was no oversight, no check-ins. Just a rotating schedule and a hope that you made it through your shift. There were areas around the quarry, marked in red on the map in the binder. They had names like Zone 4B, Unstable Reverberation, and Spill Edge. Carmen called them dead zones, not because of the terrain, but because of the sound. Apparently, if you stood in the wrong spot at the wrong time, the quarry would just ... eat the noise around you. Your voice wouldn't carry. Your footsteps wouldn't echo. You could scream at the top of your lungs, and it would sound like a breathless whisper. No one ever went into those zones unless they had to, and no one stayed there long. One of the strangest parts was the log ritual. At the end of every shift, I was supposed to write a full recap time, frequency, activity, anything heard by hand into a large spiral notebook that stayed in the shack. Digital logs were forbidden. Paper keeps better, Carmen said cryptically. When I joked that the place needed a computer, She just gave me a hard look and said, "Digital systems loop. Paper decays. It's safer that way. Another rule. Never hum. Ever. Not even quietly to yourself." I didn't understand that one until my 5th night, when I caught myself humming a few bars of a song without realizing it. The moment the sound left my lips, the mic outside picked it up, played it backwards. I still don't know how that's even possible. But the warped echo was unmistakably mine. Warped and slow, like someone dragging a rusty needle across a vinyl record. I shut up immediately and didn't make another sound the rest of the night. By then, the job had started changing me. I was jumpier, slept during the day in full clothes with a flashlight in hand, and began keeping my truck packed just in case. But something deeper was shifting too. Like the quarry wasn't just a job. Saitit was watching, listening. Each shift, I'd hear my name a little closer, or a new voice always faint, always wrong, like someone trying to remember how people talk. Then there was the knocking. One night at 3:42 a.m., I heard a soft tap on the shack wall. Not the door, the back wall where there was nothing but open quarry behind it. 3 slow knocks, then silence. I didn't move, just stared at the door and waited, heart hammering. Carmen had warned me, don't answer, don't check. So I didn't. But when my shift ended and I finally opened the door to leave, I saw something that made my skin crawl. In the dirt outside the shack, just barely visible in the flashlight beam, were bare footprints. Dozens of them. In every direction, like someone had been pacing outside, watching. No shoes, no tire tracks, just feet. I asked Carmen the next day if anyone had gone missing recently. She didn't answer. She just handed me a new set of batteries and said, "Check your reflection before every shift. If your mouth moves but you're not talking, walk away, and don't come back." At that point, I stopped wondering if the quarry was dangerous. I started wondering how it had stayed quiet for so long. It's strange how quickly fear becomes routine. By my 2nd week at Granite Hollow, I was used to the bizarre protocols, the nighttime voices, and even the creeping silence that swallowed. Up the quarry after 2 a.m., but what started to bother me wasn't the quarry itself, it was the people. Or more specifically, what happened to them. The crew was small. I only ever saw 5 or 6 people regularly, mostly shift techs or maintenance workers who rotated nights. Most barely talked. Those who did had this stiff, rehearsed way of speaking like they were trying hard not to say something wrong. There was one guy, Tim, who had a lanyard full of laminated key cards and a raspy cough that never seemed to go away. He was one of the only people who'd chat between shifts, usually while chain smoking behind the supply shed. One night, I found him sitting there in the dark, not smoking, just ... staring at the gravel. I sat down next to him, more out of habit, then comforted and asked him if he'd ever heard the voices say anything other than names. He didn't answer for a while, then finally said, "Sometimes they guess, like ... they try new ones. We're getting better at it." At first I didn't know what he meant. I asked if he thought the voices were just echoes, like acoustic tricks from the stone walls. He laughed a dry, humorless bar can, said, "Stone doesn't whisper when you're alone. It sure as hell doesn't learn new names." A couple days later, Tim stopped showing up to work. No notice. No goodbyes. I asked Carmen about it, and all she said was Tim left. When I asked if he quit or transferred, she walked away. That night, the mic picked up something new. Not a voice. A laugh. It sounded exactly like Tim's. Another shift tech. A younger guy named Russell had been working longer than most, close to 6 months. He was quiet but sharp. Always wore noise-canceling earbuds when not on duty. Avoided eye contact like it might cost him something. One night, after our shifts overlapped for an hour, he leaned in and said something that made my stomach clench. "If you ever start hearing yourself talk when your mouth is closed, leave. It means you're next." I pressed him, but he shut down immediately, refused to say another word. Later that night, I found a sticky note taped to the inside of the monitoring shack's cabinet. I hadn't noticed it before. It looked old, stained with what might have been coffee or something worse. It said, "They learn. They mimic. They want you to answer."
Aight.
Underneath, in faded ink, a different hand had written, "Do not bring recordings home." That hit me hard, because I had brought one home. It's one on the third night. I'd wanted to play it back on my laptop, run some filters, see if I could find a pattern. I'd only listened for a few minutes. But the next day, the audio file corrupted. My apartment, though an hour from the site, started to feel ... off. Mirrors fogging even when there was no steam. TV turning on to static at random. My own voice saying hello when I picked up a call before I actually spoke. No one ever told me what the quarry was really for. Not officially, but from the way everyone acted, from the way people came and went like ghosts. I started to think the job wasn't about monitoring sounds. It was about trapping them, or keeping whatever made them from crossing the edge of that pit. The quarry wasn't empty. Not really. It was full of something that was trying to remember how to be human. It happened on my 12th shift. I was running low on sleep, jittery from too much gas station coffee, and a kind of dread that had stopped being sharp and just settled into my bones. I remember watching the wall clock tick from 2:12 to 2:13 a.m., that cursed moment when the air usually went to still, like the entire quarry was holding its breath. But this time, the silence didn't come. Instead, the mic flared. Not with a whisper, not with static, but with screaming. It wasn't just one voice. It was dozens, overlapping, layered like some twisted chorus of panic and rage and sorrow. Male and female, old and young. Some just sobbing, others laughing. And one, clear as crystal, screaming my full name over and over again. My middle name included, which I'd never told anyone here. I froze. My hand hovered over the mark button, but something told me not to touch it. The moment I reached, the sound would shift, would react. So I sat there, locked in place, listening. And then it all stopped. Every sound cut out at once. Number. Fade. Just a sudden, absolute void. And then I heard it. It's not through the headset this time, but outside. It's from the quarry floor itself. A single voice, hoarse and raw, calling out, "Please? It's me. I'm still in here." I don't know. What came over me? Maybe it was the isolation, or guilt from doing nothing for so many nights. Or maybe the voice sounded too human to ignore. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped out of the shack, breaking every rule Carmen had drilled into me. The wind was sharp, and the mist hung lower than usual, curling around my boots. I followed the sound down a side trail I'd only seen marked. On the map once, labeled Entry B Closed. The gate was barely chained. The path took me deep, past where even the service lights stopped. I was about to turn back when I saw it, something moving in the quarry pit, figure hunched and twitching, crawling across the gravel. I raised the flashlight, and that's when I saw its face. It was Tim, or it looked like him. Same flannel shirt, same cough. The face was off. It twitched every few seconds, like it was trying on different expressions and failing. The mouth smiled, but the eyes looked terrified, and it spoke again, this time in my voice. "Don't leave me here." I stepped back. My brain went cold, like a fuse had blown. So that thing was trying to be Tim, but it didn't know how. And when it looked directly at me, it changed again. Its limbs snapped into strange angles. The eyes went wide and blank, and it started mimicking the exact way I breathed. I ran. I don't even remember turning. I just know I sprinted until my legs burned and my chest heaved. The whole time behind me, I could hear gravel crunching, matching my steps perfectly. When I got back to the shack, Carmen was waiting. She didn't ask what happened, just handed me a towel and a thermos and said, "You saw it." I nodded. Then she said something that chilled me deeper than the quarry ever could. "If it learns your gait, you need to start dragging one foot. Change your rhythm. If it gets your pattern, it can wear you like a coat." That's when it hit. Mythos wasn't just about hearing echoes. The quarry wasn't just a recording site. It was a breeding ground for something else. Something that wanted out. Something that copied, adapted, and tried to pass as human. And we weren't working there to monitor it. We were keeping it fed. The morning after, I saw Tim, whatever that was. I called Mitch's number and told him I was done. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told him the place was wrong, the recordings weren't normal, and that I'd be returning the gear that afternoon. Maybe swore it for a second, and then said, calmly, "You signed a non-disclosure. You break that, we don't stop you. But the quarry might." At first I thought it was just a threat, some ridiculous power play to scare me into finishing a shift or two. But when I hung up, my phone started acting up, dropping calls, recording. Strange clips in my audio memos. I'd find random files with my own voice saying things I never remembered recording, always warped, always ending with silence. That afternoon, packed my gear and drove home. I didn't even stop to clock out. As far as I was concerned, they could keep the last paycheck. I just wanted to sleep in my own bed again, in a place where I didn't have to listen for whispers in stone. But that night, around 3 a.m., my dog started barking at the bathroom mirror, a low, panicked growl that turned into whimpering. I followed him in and found steam fogging the glass, even though the shower hadn't been used. And on the mirror, just above the sink, were 3 slow, dragging fingerprints. No one else was in the apartment. I moved out the next day. Still it followed. For a week after I left the quarry, I kept seeing my own face doing things out of sync. In reflections, in black phone screens. At night, I'd dream of gravel under. My feet and voices layering over one another, calling to me in languages I didn't understand. Once, I heard my mother's voice say, "We're still listening." She died in 2009. I finally tried to go public. I emailed the audio files to a friend who worked at a small paranormal podcast, along with a rough explanation of what happened. He called me 2 hours later in a panic, said he'd opened the files and his laptop crashed immediately, hard drive wiped. Then he said he heard me speak through his phone, only it wasn't me. He blocked my number the next day. When I returned to the quarry to demand answers, because yes, like an idiot, I went back, Mitch was gone. So was Carmen. The entire operation was dark. No trailer, no office lights. The monitoring shack had been gutted, equipment gone, power cut, walls stripped. It was like no one had ever been there. But in the gravel near where the shack once stood, I found something half buried, my own spiral notebook. The one I'd left behind? The pages were damp, but still legible. Something had written across the final page in thick, jagged ink. "You don't quit, you echo." I drove home in silence, watching the rearview mirror the whole way. The next few days were quiet, too quiet. But I knew the stillness meant something was watching, waiting. And when I turned on my recorder one night, just to test it, see if it was truly over, I heard it again, my voice, saying something I hadn't said yet. I never really left. I wish I could say walking away fixed everything. I left the quarry, burned the tapes, and went back to normal life like some survivor in a horror movie who finally made it through. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that places like Granite Hollow don't let go of people. They don't want to escape, they want echoes. I moved across the state 3 weeks after quitting. New apartment, new phone, new name on my mailbox. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not friends, not family. I deleted my social media, changed my number, and even ditched my car. For a while it helped. I slept better. I stopped seeing things in the mirror. The dreams slowed. But the silence, it never really came. Not the kind that feels safe. Sometimes I'll wake up to faint tapping from inside the walls. Not mice. Not pipes. Just slow, rhythmic tapping, 3 knocks, always at 2:13 a.m. a few times. I found gravel on my bedroom floor, even though I haven't been near a quarry since I left. I don't own a single stone or plant, nothing like that. Yet somehow, it shows up. Just enough to make me wonder if I ever left at all. A week ago, I got a package with no return address. Just a box, duct taped shut, left outside my door. I opened it like a fool. Inside was a cassette tape, unlabeled. But I knew the brand, same kind we used in the shack. Same rusted edge along the plastic. I didn't want to play it. Shouldn't have played it, but I did. The tape started with static, then the sound of footsteps, gravel crunching, followed by my voice speaking in the present tense, saying things I hadn't said yet, like it was recording me from the future. Then the tape cut out, and whispered a phrase that's been burned into my head since. "Don't look behind you." Of course I did. I always do. There's nothing there. But the mirror by my kitchen table had fogged over thick, like someone had breathed on it, and faintly scratched into the surface were the words, "We remember your rhythm." I haven't slept since. I keep the lights on. I run white noise, avoid reflections, keep my phone camera turned inward just to check if anything ever moves when I'm not. But I know it's only a matter of time, because I don't hear myself talk anymore. Not really. No. I hear something trying to sound like me. Sometimes it gets close. Other times, not at all. But the tone is changing, starting to feel confident, like it's practicing in yesterday. In a moment of weakness, I called my old voicemail just to hear something familiar. The message that played back wasn't mine. It sounded like me, but it wasn't. The last line before it cut to silence said, "You're on shift now. Listen carefully." So here I am, leaving this record behind. It's not to warn anyone, because warnings don't work. Not with places like this, but because I want some version of myself to know what's coming. If you ever hear your own voice say your name when you're alone, don't answer. Don't respond. Just run. But it won't help, because the quarry doesn't care where you are. It just waits until you echo back. Looking back, though, I think the first time I really felt something was wrong was during the drive out there. It wasn't anything dramatic. It's just this subtle twisting in my gut every time the headlights lit up another stretch of fog-coated trees. The kind of feeling you brush off because you've got something to prove. I was 22, full of ambition and half-baked theories. Trying to carve a name for myself online before the word viral meant anything more than the flu. Told myself it was just nerves. It's just the pressure of filming my first real documentary. But I know now that my instincts were trying to scream louder than my ego would let them. I'll skip the boring stuff about packing gear and arguing with my ex over borrowing the camera. We were still kind of on speaking terms back then, which is how I got my hands on his Panasonic camcorder. What matters is that I was alone. It was October 10th, and I was heading to Barrow County, West Virginia, chasing a local legend that didn't get nearly enough attention. Not yet, anyway. The idea came from a message board of all places. Someone posted about the lights on Sentinel Hill in a thread about cryptids, saying they were real, saying they'd seen them dance like lanterns above the trees at night. Most people laughed. But one user replied with just a single sentence, "You don't film the lights. The lights film you." That stuck with me. I grew up on ghost stories. My grandmother used to swear by all kinds of Appalachian lore skinwalkers. Cave witches, devil's steps, and a thing she called the hollow quiet, which she never explained. This was the kind of story I was made for. Sentinel Hill was like a riddle, whispered across decades. People said the lights were older than the town itself. Some said it was a cursed place, that a cult vanished up there in the 1800s. No bodies. Just gone. Others claimed the lights were government tech gone haywire. Whatever it was, the stories were consistent. Don't go after dark, and never go alone. So of course I went after dark and I went alone. Barrow County didn't even show up on most maps. It took 6 hours of driving, one broken gas station pump, and a pit stop at a diner where no one would meet my eyes. The waitress asked if I was here to see the hill in that half-whisper people use when they're afraid of sounding superstitious. I played dumb. She didn't push. I found a Motel Miller's Rest, a squat building that smelled like mildew and loneliness, room 3C. My key was sticky with dried soda or something worse. The bed sagged in the middle. But it was cheap, and it had a decent view of the ridge. Sentinel Hill was just visible over the treetops, maybe 2 miles away. Even during the day, the woods looked strange, like they were waiting. I started filming right away intro shots of the landscape. My voiceover explaining the legend, B-roll of the hill in the distance. I figured I'd build tension by mixing local interviews with late-night stakeouts. It felt exciting, like I was on the verge of something big. The first interview didn't go well. I tracked down a woman named Esther Hollis who lived about 20 minutes from the hill. Her grandson messaged me on Usenet after I posted my plans. Said she'd seen the lights in the 70s and never talked about it. When I got there, she opened the door with a Bible clutched to her chest and told me flat out, "If you're going to put that thing on me, I'm not talking." I didn't blame her. I caught a glimpse of her arms, both covered in thin, jagged scars. She hadn't just seen the lights. She'd been marked. I did get someone to talk. The guy named Donnie, a local mechanic. Half drunk when I found him outside the gas station that doubled as a bait shop, he laughed a lot, but not like things were funny. He told me the lights started showing up every fall around the second week of October. Always at night. Always. After the fog rolled in, they blink like eyes, he said. Don't follow them. They're not leading you out. Asked if he'd seen them up close. His face tightened. Once he said, Didn't like what I heard. What did you hear? I pressed. He took a long drag off his cigarette. Sounded like someone I used to know, he said. Only they'd been dead 5 years. That night, I set up my gear on a clearing just across from the hill. I had an old tripod, the Panasonic camcorder, and a digital recorder I borrowed from the campus. A VLAB. I'd gotten permission to use the land from the motel owner. A leathery man named Curtis who warned me not to go up the ridgeline. Things don't walk right up there, he said, then refused to explain. I camped out from 9 p.m. until nearly 2 a.m. Nothing. No lights, no sounds, just wind and a few rustling animals. It was cold enough that my fingers started going. Numb, I packed up, disappointed. I hadn't expected instant magic, but I thought I'd at least catch a glimmer. The next morning, one of my batteries was missing. It wasn't just misplaced. I remember putting it in the side pocket of my bag, one of those clear plastic sleeves with a Velcro flap. I'd zipped it shut. The flap was still sealed, but the battery was gone. I checked everywhere, inside the tent, under the tripod. Even combed the grass. Nothing. I figured maybe I'd forgotten it somewhere, or it slipped out when I wasn't looking. But something about it felt off. Like something had reached into my stuff without touching the outside. Later that day, I noticed a faint smell in the air around the campsite. Burned plastic and something sour like vinegar. I blamed it on nearby trash or an animal carcass. Still, it stuck in my nose the rest of the day. That evening, I reviewed my footage from the night before. Most of it was just trees swaying in the dark. But at exactly 1:36 a.m., there was a flicker on the far right side of the frame, a small white-blue glow. It blinked 3 times and vanished. I didn't remember seeing it with my own eyes. It had only shown up on the tape. I zoomed in on the frame, but the glow was fuzzy. It's almost like it was behind something, or too far away to catch cleanly. But it was there. Not a reflection, not a camera glitch. It was real. That's when it hit me. I had proof. Even if it was just a flicker, it was something I could build the story around. I posted a screenshot on a small horror forum I frequented and asked if anyone else had ever seen lights like this. The responses were mixed. Some said swamp, gas, others said UFOs, but one reply stood out. It was from a user named HollowEyes93. They wrote, "Don't post this. They'll see you now." That night, I dreamed of standing on the hilltop, barefoot, watching the lights hover above my head like giant moths. One of them blinked, and in the flash, I saw myself. But not. My face was too long. My mouth never closed. I was smiling. Like I didn't remember how to stop. I woke up with a headache and a faint smear of dirt on the inside of my sleeping bag. I hadn't left the tent. At least I didn't think I had. And when I reached for my recorder to log the dream, it was gone. The next morning brought sun. Real sun. Not the gray, mist-tooted kind I'd grown used to on the hill. It cut through the trees like someone peeled back the sky and let something warm finally pour in. And for the first time since I'd arrived, I felt good. Not just okay, genuinely. Good. I woke up wrapped in the thick motel blanket I'd taken with me for the night shoot, and my tent had held strong against the breeze. No animal tracks nearby, no broken zippers, no sign of whatever had taken the recorder. Maybe I just mispacked again. Maybe I was being paranoid. I told myself that over coffee, over oatmeal warmed in a camping tin, over the hum of my small, portable battery pack recharging the Panasonic, this was still my project, my trip, my story to tell. And I wasn't going to let some missing gear or a weird dream knock me off course. After breakfast, I hiked the trail Curtis had told me about. It looped behind the motel and eventually led to a wide overlook that gave a clear, stunning view of Sentinel Hill. In the daylight, the hill didn't look haunted. It looked lonely. Sparse trees hunched along the ridge, their limbs starting to go red and gold in the season's slow turn. Patches of rock jutted out like broken teeth. A long, rust-colored split ran down one side like a scar that had never healed. I set the camcorder on a new tripod, took a seat on a tree stump, filmed a slow pan across the hill, while narrating some of the lore I'd dug up mentions of a vanished settlement. Old worship stones buried beneath moss, and a preacher who'd once convinced a group of settlers that the lights were signs from God. There was a rhythm to it. Finally, the hill in the frame, my voice steady, the wind just audible in the mic. It felt right, natural. I wasn't scared anymore. I was focused. I even got bold enough to rewatch the footage from the night. Before the glow at 1:36 a.m., Anne decided to lean into it in the script I was building. Maybe the lights were real. Maybe they were residual energy from some ancient ritual. Or maybe they were a trick of fog and moonlight. Either way, I had something on tape. That meant something. It meant control. Later that day, I went back to town to interview Donnie again. He was more sober this time, a little less twitchy. He laughed when I told him the battery was gone. And the recorder too, but not in a mean way. Said you probably just dropped him. The hill doesn't steal, it just ... shifts things. Makes you think sideways. Then he scratched behind his ear, hesitated, and offered me a pocket knife. Just in case, he muttered. I took it because I didn't want to be rude, but honestly, I didn't feel like I needed it. At sunset, I returned to the same clearing and set up again. Everything went smoother this time. I recorded an intro, documented the camp, and even added a little humor to the voiceover. So far, no ghosts, no lights, and just a whole lot of mud. I smiled into the lens, genuinely amused at how ordinary everything felt. When the wind kicked up around midnight, I bundled in my flannel and kept watch, eyes on the hill. And even though the fog began to slink its way across the ridge again, no lights came. Just the cold. Just the dark. Back in the motel, the next morning, I actually laughed when I found a note from Curtis tucked under my door. It said, "Saw you out there again. Don't be dumb. Stay off the hill." He had underlined "stay" 3 times. I half wondered if he was playing into the legend, trying to give me something juicy. Or maybe he was just an old man stuck in old fears. Either way, I appreciated the warning, even if I didn't plan to take it. I spent the rest of the day recharging batteries, cataloging my footage, and editing what I could on my old laptop. I even managed to get a few low-RE screenshots sent to a friend back at the university's film club. She replied, "Looks creepy as hell, but cool creepy." That made me grin. That's what I wanted, a little cool creepy, something to build. A story around something that would put my name out there. By that evening, the town felt almost friendly. I walked past the diner, waved to the waitress who'd served me 2 days before. She didn't smile exactly, but she gave a slow nod, a kind of acknowledgement. I bought batteries at the general store and even picked up a hand-drawn map of the area that an old man named Bill kept behind the counter. He said he used to hike those woods back when he was younger, before things got odd. He didn't explain what odd meant, but I didn't press. Not then. I slept like a rock that night. No dreams, no movement in the tent. The camera didn't shift. The tripod stayed planted. Nothing went missing. For the first time, I thought maybe I was through the worst of its just early trip jitters. Long drives and a mind too eager to see patterns and shadows. Sentinel Hill hadn't done anything to me. Not really. Maybe all those stories were just local flavor. Twisted. Over the years, like telephone games and whiskey lies, I remember writing in my notebook that morning, no lights, no ghosts, just wind and trees. Maybe the lights are just stories made to keep kids from getting lost in the fog. I closed the notebook, tucked it back in my bag, and didn't think about it again until later. Much later. When I found that same page torn out and crumpled in the motel bathroom sink soaked through, with new words scratched underneath in jagged handwriting that definitely wasn't mine. It said, "You're not supposed to say that out loud." The page in the sink should have rattled me more than it did, but I was still riding the high of how much work I'd gotten done. I remember standing there, staring at the soaked paper, trying to convince myself that maybe I'd done it without realizing, torn it out, scribbled in my sleep, tossed it during a half-dreamed trip to the bathroom. Sleepwalking, maybe. Stress. Or maybe I was just playing into the atmosphere I'd created for the documentary. I dried the page with a hairdryer, smoothed it out, and shoved it deep in the bottom of my backpack. Then I moved on. That's what I told myself I was doing. Moving on. But part of me knew I was avoiding it. The words scratched onto that page weren't mine. The letters were long, thin, slanted upward like they'd been written with a shaking hand or one not quite used to holding a pen. It didn't look human. Not exactly. That afternoon, I drove out to an overlook on the other side of the ridge, hoping to get a wide shot of the hill from the east. It wasn't marked on any real map, but the paper one from the general store showed a dotted line where an old Ranger road used to run. I followed it in the car until the dirt got too rough, then hiked the rest of the way with my day pack and camcorder. I got the shots I needed, but when I returned, my car door was ajar, just barely. The dome light was on. Nothing looked damaged, and all my gear was still inside except for my headphones, my good set, the over-ear studio ones I'd brought. To monitor audio while reviewing tapes, they were just ... gone. No case, no cord, nothing. I tore through the back seat, the glove box. Under the floor mat, nothing. That was 2 pieces of gear. Now first the battery, then the recorder, and now this. But unlike the others, I knew I hadn't lost the headphones. I remembered unplugging them that morning and setting them on the passenger seat. It wasn't even a question. And now they were gone. Just like that, I tried to tell Curtis about it. When I got back to the motel, but he just looked over my shoulder the whole time I was talking, like he was expecting someone else to walk in behind me. When I mentioned the headphones, his jaw tightened. That happens sometimes, he muttered. I pressed him, asked what he meant, but he only shook his head. If you're thinking of going up there for real, don't. You see the lights from a distance? Fine. You go looking too close. Things start to remember you. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I just stood there while he handed me a roll of duct tape for your tent seams. He sedan shut the door to his office. The rest of the night, I stayed inside. I told myself I was just organizing footage, but really, I didn't want to be alone in the woods again. Something felt different now. Less curious, more ... watched. I kept catching movement outside the motel window, but every time I pulled the curtain back, nothing was there. Just fog and the crooked fence out back. Once I thought I saw a figure standing on the edge of the parking lot, tall, too thin, maybe a trick of the tree line. I blinked, and it was gone. I tried to sleep early, but the motel walls were thin. Someone in the next room over kept pacing, slow, deliberate steps from one end to the other, back and forth for nearly an hour. I knocked on the wall once, gently. The pacing stopped, then nothing. The front desk claimed the room next to me was unoccupied. I woke up the next morning to find my tent set up in the middle of the motel parking lot. Fully assembled, poles and all, it had been packed in my car. I know it had. I hadn't used it since the last shoot, and I'd folded it carefully, stashed it in the trunk, locked the car. But there it was, perfectly erected, zippers closed, not a single crease in the nylon. Like someone had taken their time with it. My hands were shaking when I unzipped the flap. Inside was the missing recorder. No headphones, no battery, just the recorder placed right in the center of the sleeping bag I hadn't used in 2 nights. I picked it up carefully, afraid it might shock me or crumble like something ancient. Didn't. It was cold to the touch, and the screen flickered. Once, before going dark, I tried playing it. Nothing. Not a single sound. Just static. I drove to the sheriff's station that afternoon. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe a laugh, maybe a warning, maybe someone to tell me I was just tired and needed a break. What I got was a bored man in a tan uniform who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. When I explained what happened, he raised an eyebrow and asked if I'd been drinking. When I told him I had footage, actual video of lights, he asked if I wanted to file a missing property report instead, You never even took my name. The woods can mess with your head, he said, tapping the edge of his desk. Especially for folks not from around here. You stay away from that ridge, you'll be fine. But if you go poking into things, don't come crying when you get scared by your own shadow. I left before I started yelling. The thing is, I could have. Left. Right then. Right after that. I could have packed up, headed back to campus, scrapped the project. But something kept me there. Not just pride, not just stubbornness. There was a pull to that place, like gravity, like it had already decided I belonged to it and was just waiting for me to catch up. That night, stayed up reviewing all the footage again. Around 1:30 a.m., I spotted something new, not lights. This time, something darker, shape just behind a tree line, almost out of frame. Tall, maybe 7 feet, unmoving. I tried to zoom in, enhance it, but the tape distorted whenever I got close. The static was thicker around that part. I played the clip again, and again, and again. I swear, I heard whispering. Not loud, just beneath the static. My name. Just once, for a while, I thought I might be losing time. It started subtly waking up an hour later than I remembered setting my alarm, finding my editing program. Open with clips I didn't recall selecting. Little things. Easy to explain away. But by the 4th day, it was impossible to ignore. I'd gone to bed just after midnight. I remember that clearly. I'd set up a small alarm clock on the nightstand next to the bed and watched it blink over to 12:03 before closing my eyes. The next thing I knew, I was waking up fully clothed on the floor. My left cheek pressed to the scratchy motel carpet. The clock read 3:12. My laptop was open on the table with a new folder created on the desktop. It was labeled below. Inside were 4 video files, all time-stamped between 1:07 and 2:44 a.m. times, when I should have been asleep. I watched the first one with the sound turned off, heart in my throat. It was footage from my own camcorder set at the window facing the parking lot, but I didn't remember leaving it there. In the clip, the lens stares silently out at the dark lot, the trees in the distance, a crooked wall of black. For 20 minutes, nothing happens. Then, just barely visible between 2 trees, something moves. It slithers rather than walks long-limbed, oddly jointed and hard to track. I scrubbed the video frame by frame. It never looked directly at the camera, but I felt it knew it was being watched. It paused once, head cocked at an unnatural angle, then disappeared behind the tree line. The second video was worse. It was shot from inside the motel room. My motel room. The camcorder had been moved, pointing directly at the bed. I watched as I turned in my sleep, eyes fluttering under my lids. At one point, I sat up abruptly, staring toward the wall. The camera's audio picked up faint whispering, no words I could make out, just the low, breathy rasp of something too close to the mic, and I lay back down, stiffly, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. The tape ended a minute later. I don't remember filming any of it. I don't remember moving the camera, but I couldn't deny what I saw. My name appeared as the file title in the 3rd video. Just the letters of my first name stretched and repeated in the file name like a chant. Lana, _Lana, _Lana. I almost couldn't bring myself to click it, afraid of what I might see. When I finally did, it showed only one thing: darkness. Then, slowly, an image came into view. My tent. Not the motel room. Tent. Set up in the clearing near the ridge. The camera moved closer, shakily, almost as if someone was crawling with it in hand. A hand briefly passed in front of the lens then, bone-white fingers too long to be normal. The tent flap opened on its own. I stopped watching. I couldn't watch anymore. I drove back to the general store the next morning, hoping to find Bill, the man who gave me the map. But the woman behind the counter, someone I hadn't seen before, said there was no Bill who worked there. Never. Had been. When I insisted, she got this tight look on her face and went into the back without another word. I waited for 10 minutes before giving up. On my way out, I noticed the map stand was gone too, replaced with racks of dusty postcards and expired bug spray. I went to the diner after that. I just needed something normal. I sat at the counter, ordered a coffee, and tried to breathe through the buzz in my head. When the waitress brought my drink, I recognized her. Same woman as before. I asked if she remembered me. She didn't answer at first, just stared at my shirt, her lip twitching. Then she said, "You were alone last time. Now there's two of you." I asked what she meant, heart thudding, but she just blinked slowly and walked away. That night, I tried not to sleep. I stayed up watching old tapes from a different project, trying to calm myself. Around 2 a.m., the static started. At first, I thought it was from the recorder, but when I muted everything, it didn't stop. It wasn't coming from any device, it was in the room. A low hum that grew sharper the longer I sat in silence, like an insect crawling inside my skull. Then the lights flickered. Once, twice. I stood up, back toward the door, and froze. The doorknob was turning, slowly back and forth. Not opening, just twisting. Testing. I didn't make a sound. It stopped after 30 seconds. I stayed awake until dawn. The next day I drove out to the clearing again, not to film, but to prove to myself that nothing had changed. The place looked the same. Fallen leaves, tall grass, the faint smell of wood smoke in the breeze. But when I stepped into the middle of the site, I felt something shift.
Ow.
The air got colder, heavier. I looked down and saw my missing notebook lying at my feet, open to the same page I'd torn out days ago. The words were smeared, but still legible. The phrase "you're not supposed to say that out loud" was written over and over, filling the entire spread, leaking into the margins. The ink dark and sunken into the paper like it had been burned there. I picked it up. The ground beneath it was wet. No rain had fallen that week. As I walked back to the car, I realized I wasn't alone. I kept hearing a second pair of footsteps, always just behind mine, always stopping when I did. I turned around 3 times, saw nothing, but the sound didn't lie. I wasn't imagining it. Back in the car, I found something tucked under my windshield wiper. A photograph. An old Polaroid. It showed the clearing from above, as if taken from the trees, from the sky. And in the center, there I was. Standing alone, except I wasn't. There was a second figure beside me, faint and blurry, its arm outstretched toward my shoulder, just inches from touching me. I don't remember anyone being there. The Polaroid stayed in my jacket pocket the rest of that day. I couldn't stop checking it, as if the image might change the longer I looked, as if the blurred figure beside me might shift into something more defined. But it never did. Just that faint shape with its arm outstretched, frozen inches from me, like it had been reaching for something it never quite got the chance to hold. I kept telling myself it had to be doctored, a prank, something Curtis or Donnie had cooked up to scare me out of town. But that didn't explain how it was taken from above. There was no drone, no vantage point that high. The trees were too dense, unless someone had climbed them, or unless no. I wasn't ready to finish that thought yet. I decided I needed distance, not just from the motel or the clearing, but from the project itself. I drove 2 towns over, found a public library with free Wi-Fi and a dusty microfiche reader, hoping I could dig up something, anything, about Sentinel Hill that didn't come from old forum threads or blurry internet scans. The librarian didn't ask questions, just pointed me to the archive room and let me be. I spent 6 hours flipping through old Barrow County Gazette clippings. Most were what you'd expect: farming reports, local fairs, church bake sales. But then I found an article from 1961, small, buried on the back of a sports section about a search party gone wrong, according to the article. 3 boys had gone missing near Sentinel Hill during a weekend camping trip. Only one came back. He was 13. His name was Jeremy Folsom. The article mentioned that he wouldn't speak to anyone, not even his own parents, and had to be sedated at Barrow County Clinic. It also said he kept repeating one sentence: "They walked into the sky." I searched the name. There was no follow-up, no obituary, no school record. It was like Jeremy Folsom vanished a second time, this time from paper. Then I found something else, a handwritten note tucked inside one of the history volumes in the reference section. It was old, creased, yellowed, probably stuck there by someone years ago. It read, "The lights come for the curious. They feed on eyes. Don't look too long. Don't film. Don't watch." I copied it down word for word. By the time I left the library, it was already getting dark. The drive back to Barrow County felt different, slower, like the roads had stretched in my absence. Trees that weren't there before now lined the shoulders, and my GPS kept flickering out, resetting itself. Once it displayed a location I didn't recognize below Barrow. I tried to screenshot it, but the phone froze and shut off. When it restarted, my photo gallery was empty. Every picture from the trip gone, even the saved screenshots. Back at the motel, I found my door open. I know I locked it. I always locked it. My bags were untouched, but someone had been inside. The curtain had been drawn differently, slightly twisted and uneven. My camcorder was still on the desk, but the memory card had been removed and set carefully next to it. Someone had taken it out and examined it, then left it behind as if to say, "We see what you see." And that's when I noticed the notebook. Not the one I'd brought, but a different one. Older, thicker, leather-bound with warped corners and a rusted clasp. It was sitting neatly on the motel bed. No note, no markings. I didn't touch it at first. I circled the bed 3 times, half expecting someone to pop out from under it or from the bathroom, but no one was there, just that notebook waiting. Eventually I opened it. The pages were packed with writing dents, looping cursive that was hard to follow. The first few pages were lists, names, dates, times. Many were crossed out, and some had red dots drawn beside them. Then came sketches and settling ones. Long figures with sharp limbs, clusters of eyes arranged in spirals, trees with mouths in their trunks. Interspersed between them were phrases like "they film us now." A frame opens both ways and not watchers' recorders. I turned to a page near the middle and froze. My name was there. Full name, first and last. It arrived. October 10th, 1993, filming began at dusk. Already watched. Will be taken if she records again. I dropped the notebook. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The motel room felt suddenly alive, like the walls were listening. I packed what I could in 5 minutes: camcorder, memory cards, both notebooks, and bolted to the car. I didn't even check out, just drove. I made it 20 miles before I realized something was missing: the tape. The original tape from the first night, the one with the light flickering at 1:36 a.m., I'd tucked it into my backup bag. It's the one that rode in the back seat, but it was gone. It's not just missing, gone. The bag had been sliced open along the seam, clean, like with a razor. Nothing else was touched. Just that tape. And as I sat there on the side of the road staring at the empty bag, the radio flicked on. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't even started the engine. But the static was back low, crackling, rhythmic. Then a voice broke through. It was mine, only it wasn't a recording I'd made, not one I remembered. The voice said, "I saw them. I saw them walk through her eyes." Then it laughed, a hollow, garbled sound that echoed like it came from the bottom of a well. I shut the radio off, yanked the keys from the ignition. I sat in silence for what felt like hours. When I finally started driving again, I told myself I'd go to the police, not the Barrow County Sheriff, real police, someone who would believe me. But as I approached the highway on-ramp, a roadblock stopped me. 3 orange cones. No officers, no cars, just a sign that read, "Road closed." Due to filming, I should have turned around. But instead, I stepped out of the car, walked to the sign, and realized it wasn't printed. It had been handwritten, sloppily, with red marker that smeared under my fingers. I looked up and saw someone standing on the hill across the road, watching me. No camera, no lights, just standing there, waiting. I don't know how long I stood there, watching the figure across the road. Maybe 10 seconds, maybe 2 minutes. He, or it never moved. The wind tugged at my jacket and leaves blew past my shoes, but nothing stirred on the ridge. The longer I stared, the harder it became to focus on him. It was like he was a part of the air itself, a gap in the world that bent light wrong. I blinked hard, and when I opened my eyes again, he was gone. I didn't hear footsteps. I didn't hear anything. Just that flat, dead quiet like sound itself had taken a breath and refused to let it out. I got back in the car, turned around, and drove straight back to Barrow County. Not because I wanted to, I was done with the hill, done with the story, done with whatever ancient thing had slipped under my skin while I wasn't looking. But I had nowhere else to go. The roadblock was just the first. Every detour led me back. Roads I'd never driven started to look familiar. Exits blinked past and reappeared. It was like I'd fallen into a loop, the landscape restitching itself. Around me, funneling me toward the place I'd tried to escape. By the time I got back into town, the sun had started to set, and the fog was already rolling in. I gave up trying to outrun it. The hill wanted me back. I drove straight to the only person I could think of, Curtis. His office light was still on behind the stained glass of the front desk. I slammed on the brakes, ran up the steps, and pounded on the door. It opened after the third knock. He didn't look surprised to see me, just tired. He ushered me in without a word. The front desk smelled like oil and burnt coffee. A dusty television sat in the corner, showing static on mute. I told him everything. The notebook, the missing tape, the voice on the radio. I expected him to stop me, to laugh or wave it off or say I'd been breathing in too much mold from the motel's vents. But he just stood there, arms crossed, jaw tight, and waited for me to finish. Then he reached under the desk and pulled out a small, dented lockbox. He opened it slowly and slid a single photograph across the counter. It was me, standing in the motel parking lot 2 nights earlier, holding my tripod mid-laugh. I remembered that moment. I'd taken a timed photo for documentation. But in this image, there was something over my shoulder, another figure. Faint, out of focus, crouched low behind me, its head tilted sideways like it had no neck. I felt my stomach turn cold. I've had this happen before, Curtis said. 3 times in the last 20 years. All young, all with cameras. He nodded toward the photo. They come for the ones who look too closely. The lights, ... there. They're not just lights. They're eyes, reflections of something older. Something that doesn't want to be seen but needs to be known. I asked why he stayed, why anyone stayed. Curtis looked at me with something between pity and resignation. Because you can't leave once you've been seen, he said. Not really. You'll go, but it'll follow. In reflections. In shadows. Every frame you ever shot will start to change. Faces and backgrounds. Shapes and windows. People will call you crazy. Will call yourself lucky just to forget what you saw. But you won't forget. Not all of it. I told him I needed help. Real help. Police, news, outlets, anyone. He shook his head. They won't come here anymore. Not since '78. Not since Folsom. I left the motel before midnight. I didn't go. Back to the room. I drove out one last time to the edge of the clearing where I'd shot the original footage. This time, I didn't bring the camera. No tripod, no notebook. Just a flashlight, my car keys, and a lighter I didn't remember. Packing. I don't know what I was hoping to find. Closure, maybe. Proof. A sign that I wasn't insane. But the moment I stepped into that clearing again, I knew something had changed. The ground felt wrong beneath my boots soft, almost spongy like it had been soaked in something that didn't fully dry. The trees leaned in closer than I remembered, their branches swaying against a wind I couldn't feel. Then the lights began. First 1, then 3, then 7, blinking in sync. Pale, white-blue spheres bobbing just above the grass, moving in slow arcs like they were breathing together. My flashlight flickered, then died. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move right like I was pushing through syrup. The lights came closer. I heard a voice behind me say my name, soft at first, then louder, not yelling, not threatening, just ... repeating. Lana, Lana, Lana. I turned, and standing in the woods were people maybe a dozen, all of them backlit by the lights, faces obscured. One stepped forward, thought I saw Donnie, then Esther, then someone who looked like me. Not exactly, but enough. Her smile was too wide. Her eyes were just black. I don't remember much after that, just flashes, laughter. Not the kind you'd want to hear. Something sharp and wet. My own voice echoing back at me, distorted and looping like a broken tape. I woke up in my car at dawn, parked behind the diner. My phone was gone. My camcorder was gone. My shoes were missing. My feet were wet, covered in mud and pine needles. I drove out of Barrow County without stopping, without checking my mirrors. The road stayed still this time. No loops, no tricks. I didn't breathe until I crossed state lines, but that wasn't the end. I didn't talk about Barrow County for nearly a year. When people asked about the trip, I told them the documentary fell through. I said the weather was bad, the location didn't work out, and the footage wasn't usable. A few friends pushed for more, especially those who knew how much I'd invested. How obsessed I'd been with Sentinel Hill, I just smiled and said I moved on to different projects. They didn't press after that. I think they saw the change in me. My professor once told me I seemed quieter now, like you're waiting for something to catch up, he said. What? And he wasn't wrong. I tried to get back to normal. I really did. I deleted all the old files from my laptop. Every photo, every note, every fragment of that trip. I replaced my gear. I even got a new camcorder and thought about starting a series on abandoned buildings instead. Still creepy, but grounded, safer. But every time I looked through a viewfinder, something felt off. The lens never quite focused right. I'd zoom in and feel like something was about to appear in the background. Once, I caught myself whispering my own name while filming an abandoned church in Ohio. I hadn't even realized I was doing it until I played the audio back and heard it soft, rhythmic like a chant. About 4 months after I left West Virginia, I started getting mail, always unmarked, always arriving without a return address. The first envelope held nothing but a strip of developed Filmate frames of static. I held it up to the light, and in the very last frame, I could make out the edge of my motel window. The curtain drawn back just enough to see a figure standing. Behind the glass, no features. Just that outline, waiting. The second envelope came a month later. A single Polaroid, still framed from the lost tape, the one that had vanished from my bag. It showed me in the clearing. But this time, the lights weren't hovering. They were inside me, or at least that's what it looked like. 7 white blue, flares blooming from my chest and eyes like I was a lantern, burning from within. I don't remember that happening. I don't remember anything like it. But the trees and the angle matched exactly. Someone was still watching. I moved apartments shortly after that. I didn't tell anyone. Paid cash for a P.O. box in a different town. Stopped using my real name for online forums. Even changed my documentary. Credit names 2 initials. I thought maybe I could outrun whatever I'd brought back. That if I just stopped looking, it would stop seeing me. But last week it found me again. People don't get it unless they've lived it. The road is a world of its own. It's not just a job, it's a lifestyle, a rhythm, a culture that you either grow up inside or never fully understand. I was born into it. Dad. Steady. Eddie ran long hauls across the Southwest for 25 years. His father before him drove rigs back when you had to tune your CB. With a paperclip and hope to hell you didn't lose the signal outside Santa Fe, our family didn't do college or office jobs. We did engines, diesel, in static-choked voices on Channel 19. I got my handle Kid Mercury before I could legally drive. I had my first solo night ride at 19. There was nothing else I ever wanted. Looking back, though, I should have been surprised when things started to go strange out there. But that's the thing with the road. Strange is normal. You hear 100 stories before breakfast. Ghost dogs near Route 50. A hitchhiker who disappears when you pass mile marker 203. Mysterious lights over the desert. Most of it's just talk. Just ways to keep your eyelids from drooping when you've got 3 more hours before the next stop. But this thing with Ronnie, with Big Rig Ronnie and the voice on the radio, this was different. Ronnie was a legend. Anyone who worked night hauls through New Mexico in the late 80s knew him. His real name was Ronald Dean Mason, but no one called him that. On air, he was Big Rig Ronnie, and he hosted what we all called the Midnight Convoy. and unofficial. CB broadcast out of his cab. Halfway between a talk show and therapy session for tired drivers burning through lonely hours, he played tapes of old country songs, told jokes, shared traffic updates, and did shout-outs for anyone hauling in the dark. I remember his voice like it was a part of my childhood. Low, steady, always smiling. The kind of voice that made you feel less alone, especially when you were deep in the desert with nothing but stars and static for company. My dad knew him personally. It shared routes a few times. Ran a couple tag team deliveries from El Paso to Santa Rosa. Said Ronnie was the kind of guy who'd give you his last thermos of coffee if it meant you'd make your delivery on time. Never once heard a bad word about him. So when he vanished in 1987, just disappeared in the middle of his broadcast, it sent a ripple through the whole CB world. I was only 11 then, but I remember how quiet the radio got in the days. That followed. No jokes, no updates, just dead air and scattered conversations from people trying to make sense of it. They found his rig idling on the shoulder of Highway 70, engine still running, cab door open, mic on the dash, no sign of struggle. No blood, just a half-finished thermos of coffee and an open cassette deck with a tape halfway through an old Johnny Cash song. His final transmission was recorded by another driver named Lou Crowbar Jensen, who was running 30 miles behind. Crowbar swore up and down that he heard Ronnie arguing with someone, only that someone sounded exactly like Ronnie. Same voice, same laugh, same everything. The last words anyone heard were, "I told you to shut up. I'm the real one." Then static. For years, it became a kind of roadside myth. Some said it was a breakdown. Others whispered about desert experiments, secret frequencies, or mere versions of people born from long exposure to radio waves. But everyone agreed on one thing: if you heard Ronnie's voice now, late at night on Highway 70, you didn't answer. Because if you did, something answered back. I should have known better than to chase the story. But when you grow up with truck stops instead of soccer practice, you learn early that the road keeps its own kind of history, a history you feel like you belong to, even if it eats you alive. I wasn't just chasing a ghost story. I was chasing a part of my family. Legacy. My dad passed 2 years ago. He left behind his rig, his handle, and a stack of spiral notebooks filled with radio logs. CB transcripts, and one word written in the margins over and over. Ronnie. That's how this all started. With my dad's notebooks, a half-drunk memory of Ronnie's laugh on a static-filled night, and my own stubborn need to prove that what happened to him wasn't just a myth. I told myself it was research, that I was documenting trucker lore for a podcast project, that I'd interview old drivers, retrace Ronnie's last known route, and record whatever I could for posterity. But that was a lie. I wanted to hear him. I wanted to hear Big Rig Ronnie's voice for myself. The CB community today isn't what it used to be. But there's still a network out there, old school haulers. Ham radio hobbyists, ghost chasers who map strange frequencies. On desert maps, they all said the same thing: don't respond. If you hear Ronnie on Channel 19 after midnight, kill the signal. Do not talk back, because it's not him. I laughed the first time someone told me that. Said they were watching too much late-night cable. But the guy didn't laugh back. Just said, when you hear yourself say something before you say it, you'll understand. And that's exactly what happened my first night on Highway 70. There are rules to running nights on a long haul. Not written ones necessarily, but rules everyone who does this job for real eventually follows if they want to stay sane. Keep your headlights clean. Don't eat greasy food past midnight unless you want to fall asleep or spend the next 50 miles with stomach cramps. Don't stop for hitchhikers on isolated stretches, especially not the ones who wave with both arms. When it comes to CB radio, Channel 19 is king. That's the lifeline for truckers. Real-time traffic alerts, warnings about roadkill, or black ice, speed traps, breakdown calls, or just small talk to keep you company while the world sleeps. It's not fancy, but it works. And when you're deep into the second half of a 10-hour shift, the voice on the other end might be the only thing keeping you tethered to the world. The etiquette is old school and practical. Identify yourself with your handle. Keep chatter tight. When things are busy, don't talk over someone in distress. And most of all, don't fake a voice. That's an unspoken cardinal sign. No impersonations, no playing around with voice changers, no feeding prank audio through the channel. It's dangerous. Not just because it's irritating, but because it breaks the one constant out there: trust. You trust the guy on the other end is who he says he is. That his warning is real. That if he tells you there's a turned-over cattle hauler near mile marker 186, he's not pulling your leg while you lose traction on a blind curve. CB radios. Supposed to be honestra and direct. You don't lie on the line, that's the culture. Which is why Ronnie's final transmission always bothered people more than they admitted. If the man who symbolized late-night safety, who practically invented the modern convoy radio format, ended up screaming at a voice that sounded like himself, then that meant something else could get into the system. Something that wasn't human. Something that could copy what it heard. I made my run through Highway 70 on a Thursday night. The sky was dark and cloudless. Stars freckled thick enough to make the desert look almost kind. The road was empty, just me. The hum of tires on asphalt and the low murmur of my own engine. I'd outfitted the cab with some upgrades. Digital dash recorder, portable M scanner audio tap into the CB, and a rigged laptop to archive everything automatically in case something weird did happen. It was a setup most truckers wouldn't bother with, but I needed documentation. I needed to catch something that would prove the voice wasn't a trick of bad reception or old stories. It's twisted over time. At 11:34 p.m., I flipped to channel 19. Standard call signs were running. Blue Coyote warning about a construction slowdown near Deming. Desert Cat asking if I was hauling reefer. I gave my handle Kid Mercury and got a few pings back, mostly friendly banter. Nothing strange yet. The radio crackled now and then, but that was normal in the desert. The air gets dry enough to turn sound sharp, especially when you're bouncing between rock faces and wide open sky. Then someone started playing old country music. I thought it was a channel drift at first, but the signal was clear. A tape deck. Probably, judging by the warble on the high end. Johnny Cash's The Man Comes Around, a classic. Not unusual by itself, plenty of drivers still play music on the line, especially when things are dead quiet. But when the track ended, a voice came on. Welcome to the Midnight Run. Big Rig Ronnie riding your shoulder. Hope you're all keeping it between the lines tonight. I froze. My hands were tight on the wheel, and for a second, I forgot to breathe. The voice wasn't a perfect match, but it was damn close. I reached over and checked the scanner log. The transmission was local. No cross-channel bleed, no outside interference. Whoever was broadcasting was nearby within 20 miles. Tops, no one else said anything. The channel went dead for a beat, like everyone had heard it and didn't know how to respond. Then a guy I didn't recognize came on, real low, almost whispering, "Don't key up, don't talk back." I ignored him. I keyed the mic. "Ronnie? You out there, man?" I asked it like I was joking, like I didn't believe it. But my voice cracked on the last word. The response came instantly. "Well, would you look at that Kid Mercury on the line?" That's when it hit me. I hadn't said my handle over the channel since I'd flipped on. I checked the laptop log. I was right, my last transmission had just been a weather query. A mileage update, no name, no ID. Nothing that would have told anyone listening who I was. Ronnie, or whatever this was, laughed. Same smooth, gravel-warm voice I remembered from my childhood. But something about the timing was wrong. Like it was repeating old dialogue. Or lagging behind. Like someone pressing play on a memory. "I ran with your old man," it said. "He used to say, you'd grow up quick, so the road gets into your bones and stays there." Guess he was right. I didn't respond. Just listened. "You ever wondered," the voice continued, "what happens to the ones who get too close to the edge of the map?" Silence followed. Then a burst of static. The kind that makes your skin prickle. And just like that, it was gone. The channel cleared. Normal traffic returned like nothing had happened. No one mentioned it. No one even acknowledged what we'd just heard. I logged the transmission, marked the coordinates, and set the rig to record continuously through the rest of the drive. But in that moment, I realized something vital. The rules of CB radio were still intact, but something out there had learned how to bend them. After that first night, I couldn't let it go. Something about the voice stuck in my head like a splinter, familiar enough to be safe, but off just enough to make your skin tighten. I knew the risks. Every old school hauler I spoke to warned me not to play with it. Bosh, but warnings feel different. When they come secondhand, the truth is, I wanted to hear it again. I wanted proof that it wasn't a fluke, that something out there was real. And maybe deep down, I wanted to know what had happened to my dad. He'd written that name, Ronnie, over and over in those notebooks for a reason. So I mapped the route he used to run, Las Cruces to Clovis. A long, dry stretch of open road where cell towers fade and the desert takes back everything. I timed my drive to hit the same windows he'd logged, between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. The hours when the sky sinks low and the CB traffic thins to whispers. I brought backup batteries, printed maps, and 3 different kinds of audio recorders, all synced and strapped to the rig. It wasn't just a haul anymore. It was an investigation at first. It was quiet, uneventful. I drove for 2 hours past shuttered gas stations and scattered sagebrush. Windows down, letting the wind pour in. My CB stayed on Channel 19, chatter mostly idle drivers passing through, trading jokes and weather updates. No mention of Ronnie, no old songs bleeding through. I started to think I'd missed it, that whatever I'd heard the week before was a lucky or unlucky dash glitch. Then at 12:43 a.m., as I passed mile marker 205, the cassette hiss returned. It started as faint background noise like a radio left on in another room. Then the signal surged. Clear. Steady. That same old country track again. The man comes around. The same tape Ronnie always played. But this time, I recognized the exact moment it skipped. The tiny stutter at the 41-second marker flaw. I remembered from my dad's own recordings decades ago. I keyed up without thinking. "Big rig, Ronnie." "Come in," I said. My voice shook just slightly. "This is Kid Mercury. I'm on 70, eastbound. You copy?" There was a pause. Voice came through. "Copy that, Kid Mercury. Good to hear your voice again." I gripped the mic tighter. "I've got questions," I said. "I'm looking for answers. You disappeared in 87. People say he cut me off. People say a lot of things. Most of them never rode further than the edge of their headlights. Yet I felt my stomach drop. That was one of my dad's phrases. He used to say that to rookies. I never told anyone that, not online, not in interviews. "You sound just like him," Ronnie said. "It's in your blood. You know the hum of tires in your bones. That's why you're here." I didn't know what to say. The voice was too real, too precise. It wasn't just a recording. It was conversational, responsive. It felt like talking to someone who knew me. Then I heard something strange in the background. Another voice, fainter, layered beneath Ronnie's. It sounded like ... me, my voice, saying, "Copy that, big rig, Ronnie," over and over, as if someone had looped a recording. "You hear that?" I asked. He paused, then said, "Some echoes don't fade. You talk long enough into the static. Eventually the static talks back." Blood turned to ice. It wasn't a metaphor, it was a warning. The voice faded out. The music cut off mid-note. The CB went dead, but that wasn't the end of it. Later that night, I stopped at a trucker rest pull-off near mile 212. A wide gravel. Lot empty except for a single old rig parked off to the far left. No lights, no engine running. I backed in, killed the engine, and stepped out to stretch my legs. The desert air was colder than I expected. Still, too still. Then I saw it. On the side of the other rig, painted in bold, flaking letters across the door, "The Midnight Convoy." I approached slowly, boots crunching over gravel. The cab looked abandoned, dust layering the windshield. But there was a soft red glow from inside, a radio light. I stepped up, looked through the driver's side window, ... and there it was. A working CB unit, no driver, no gear, no personal items. Just the mic, still swinging gently from its hook, like it had just been let go. I climbed back into my own rig fast. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I checked my laptop logs. One of the files had saved without a file name, Just a time code. 1 hour, 3 minutes, and 12 seconds. I played it. It was my own voice, talking, conversing with someone. Only I hadn't spoken during that time. I'd been silent, listening. My voice on the recording said, "I'm not the first, am I?" Ronnie's reply, "No, but you're the first to listen." The first time I heard my own voice speak before I did, I was rolling through a dusted stretch of eastbound 70 just past Alamogordo. The sky had turned that deep, moonless blue, the kind that swallows your lights and makes you feel like you're floating instead of driving. The road was dead quiet. Even the CB was quiet, no chatter, no background static, no familiar hiss of signals pinging around the hills, just silence. I was fiddling with the tuner, trying to raise someone from the usual overnight crowd, when the speaker cracked back to life. Not with music, not with Ronnie, but with me. Eastbound 70, clear through the flats. Watch for debris near mile 216. It was my voice, no question about it. Right cadence, right tone. Even the slight throat rasp I get when I've had too much coffee. But I hadn't said anything, not then. I pulled over hard, tires kicking up. Gravel engine, idling low. I replayed the last log on my digital recorder. Same voice, same sentence. Only now it continued. Kid Mercury, eastbound, heading past the curve. Time's off. Time's off by a few minutes, but it'll line up soon, don't worry. Just keep driving. I stared at the dash. My knuckles were white against the steering wheel. The hair on the back of my neck stood up like a switch had been flipped. The voice kept playing, kept knowing. I shut the system off, unplugged the CB unit completely, and sat in that cab with nothing but the engine hum and the beat of my own pulse in my ears. I don't know how long I sat there watching the moon rise over the empty highway. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe an hour. It didn't feel like time was working right anymore. Eventually I got moving again, but things didn't go back to normal. Over the next few nights, the CB became unpredictable. Signals would come through without warning, sometimes country music from Ronnie's playlist. Sometimes static, layered with what sounded like whispers in my own voice. Not full sentences. Not clear, but familiar. Words I'd said before, buried. Under reverb, like old tapes that had been chewed up and played back through something breathing. Then the mirrors started to lie. I was parked at a rest area near Carrizozo. Engine off, windows rolled halfway down. I was brushing my teeth in the side mirror, half watching the traffic roll past, when I caught something move behind me. Just a shadow, a flicker, like someone ducking out of view. Turned around. No one was there. But when I looked back at the mirror, I saw my reflection still brushing, still moving, even though I was standing still. I leaned in. My reflection smiled. I didn't. I slammed the door, locked the rig, and drove for 2 hours without stopping. I didn't look in the mirrors again that night. Back on the CB, the other drivers were starting to act strange too. One night I heard Desert Cat come on the line again, same handle I'd heard before. We'd spoken a couple of times. She was sharp, good-natured, ran refrigerated trailers through the desert, and always gave solid traffic advice. But this time her voice was ... off, slower, like she was speaking from a distance, underwater maybe. She called my name twice. Then, she said, "You're late, Mercury. We were expecting you." I keyed the mic. "What do you mean expecting me?" Silence. Then the voice repeated the same line. Word for word, exact same intonation. "You're late, Mercury. We were expecting you." I waited. Then, another version of her voice came through, sharper, more natural. "Kid Mercury, ignore that. I didn't say that. Something's jamming the channel. Switch to 21 now." I did. The moment I changed frequencies, the interference stopped. The static vanished like someone flipping a switch. Desert Cat came back on, breathless. "You still there?" she asked. "Yeah, what the hell was that?" "I don't know, I didn't say any of that. I just logged on 5 minutes ago. But someone's been using my voice." I heard it too. I heard it say my words, like it was pulling phrases out of the air. I didn't answer right away, or something. was tightening around us, around all of us, still driving the night roads and using those radios like they were gospel. Something out there had learned the rules of our world, and worse, it had learned to fake us. The final straw that night came just before dawn. I was nearing a way station when my own voice came over the radio against you. Steady, Yule. Want to take the off-ramp Mercury? You're waiting at the way station. You won't pass. You'll lose the load. I didn't respond. I kept rolling forward. You're not listening. Take the ramp. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. And it was my own voice giving it. I passed the off-ramp. Nothing happened. The way station was closed. No patrol cars. Just empty floodlights and a cracked parking lot. I made it through fine. But on my recorder, that same voice played again. Later, same phrase, same inflection. Only this time, it ended with something new. You don't listen. That's why he disappeared. It didn't clarify who he was, but I knew by the third week on the road, I stopped answering the CB at night. I kept it on, always on, but I wouldn't press the mic anymore, wouldn't talk back no matter what I heard. I'd begun to realize it didn't matter who was on the other end. Their voice could match perfectly, their words could sound familiar, but something in the timing was always wrong. A beat too slow, rhythm too practiced. Even the silence felt ... scripted. It was like having a conversation with someone who'd learned how to talk by reading your journal. They knew what to say. They didn't know how to mean it. The thing is, I didn't trust anyone anymore. The voices on the CB, not the drivers I passed, not even myself. I started double-checking my own transmissions, comparing recordings to my memory of what I said. And sometimes, ... they didn't match. Sometimes I'd listen to a playback and hear myself say things I didn't remember saying. Specific things. Things about my dad. About Ronnie. About letting it in. But I'd never said those words. I would have. Remember one night, somewhere east of Roswell? I pulled off the road after a long dead stretch and found a lone truck parked under a flickering rest stop lamp. Engine off. Cab silent. Nothing unusual at first glance. But as I passed, I saw something that made my blood run cold. It was my rig, my exact make and model. Same paint. Same slight dent near the back left mud flap. Even the same cracked sticker on the rear bumper, trust the road or go home. That was my dad's. I'd kept it when I inherited the rig. This wasn't a look-alike. It was mine. I parked 20 yards away and sat there, hands trembling on the wheel. I didn't move, just watched. There was no driver. The cab was dark, but every few seconds, the taillights would flash like a pulse. I radioed out quietly on channel 19. This is Kid Mercury. Identify yourself. No answer. Then, over the speaker, I heard my own voice reply. Just checking the mirrors. Those were the exact words I'd spoken an hour earlier when Desert Cat asked if I was awake. I hadn't broadcast them. I'd said them off mic. I was sure of it. I cut the engine, stepped out into the cold. The desert air was still, heavy with silence. As I approached the rig, I could hear a faint sound coming from inside, muffled radio static and low murmuring. Like a CB unit left running too long on a dead channel, I climbed up to the door and opened it slowly. No one was inside. But the mic was swinging gently from its cradle, and on the dashboard sat one of my dad's old notebooks. The exact same spiral-bound kind I'd packed away in my own glove box. This one was open to a page filled with handwriting. That matched mine. The top line read, "You're not supposed to see this part." Below that, "Copy's better if you're still awake." That's when I saw the small black cassette player plugged into the dash. The tape was spinning, playing a loop of my voice from earlier that night. I reached for it, and as I did, the player ejected the tape with a sharp click. The moment it did, the CB crackled to life. "Don't shut it off. You need to finish. Becoming." The voice was mine. Again, but not the version I recognized. It was deeper, slower, hollow, like it had been run through layers of static and echoed in a long hallway. I backed out of the rig and slammed the door. The moment I did, the taillights shut off. Just blinked out like someone had cut power to the entire vehicle. I ran back to my own cab, engine roaring to life as I peeled off down the road, eyes darting to every mirror. But nothing followed. Not yet. The next day I made calls. I contacted a few of the old-timers in the CB forums people. I trusted names I'd seen in logbooks and old posts for years. One of them, a guy who went by Cicada 8, answered with a single question: "Has it started mimicking your thoughts yet?" I asked what he meant. He said, "It doesn't need your voice. It doesn't even need your face. It needs your intention. Once it understands how you think, how you react, it stops pretending to be other people. It starts pretending to be you." According to him, the voice doesn't come from a single place. It rides the infrastructure bouncing through CB repeaters, signal towers, even low-band FM relays that haven't been decommissioned yet. It uses what we leave behind: recordings, transmissions, echoes, and the more it hears you, the more it knows how to replace you. I asked Cicada how he knew all this. He went quiet for a long time, then said, "Because I've already stopped driving, but I still hear myself out there. Every night I don't even need a radio anymore. Sometimes I hear myself talking in my sleep." After that, I stopped using. My handle. I disabled my CB. I started sleeping in daytime truck stops with fluorescent lights and cameras. I kept all mirrors covered and unplugged the rig's built-in mic system, but none of it helped, because now, the voice doesn't need the radio. Last night it spoke through my GPS. "Turn left, ... Kid Mercury." I hadn't programmed a destination. I hit the highway going 87 miles an hour, tires howling against the asphalt, the entire rig vibrating with panic. My GPS had just spoken my name in my own voice, and when I yanked the power cord, the unit kept talking. That was the final straw. I didn't care if I broke every traffic law in New Mexico. I just needed to put distance between me and whatever was crawling through the signals. I drove blind for 2 hours, ignoring exits, bypassing way stations, blowing past familiar landmarks that looked warped in the edges of my headlights, like the desert was curling up around the road to swallow it whole. I didn't stop until the rig's fuel gauge dropped into the red. I found a pull-off near an abandoned tourist trap, an old faux diner turned souvenir shop with half the roof missing. I parked behind the shell of the building, shut off the lights, and killed the engine. Everything went still. No wind. No animal sounds, no hum from nearby power lines. It was too quiet. I sat there in the dark, hand on the ignition key, breath fogging the glass, heart still pounding in my throat. I didn't know what I was waiting for. Maybe a sound, maybe a signal, maybe some impossible confirmation that this wasn't just madness spiraling inward. And then it came. It's not through the CB, not through the GPS, but from the cab's rearview mirror. I saw movement not outside, but inside the reflection. A flicker of something behind me, just off frame. When I turned around, the sleeper cab was empty. But in the mirror, I saw a figure shifting slightly, a silhouette, blurred, hunched, almost as if crouched behind the seat, breathing softly. The breath wasn't mine. I would have heard it, felt it. But in the mirror, it was fogging up the interior. Glass, I stared. The figure tilted its head, and I watched in frozen terror as it began to rise slowly to full height, taller than I should be able to stand in that space. I turned again, still nothing behind me. But the mirror didn't lie. Then the door lock clicked. I nearly jumped out of my skin. The truck had locked itself. A second later, the lights flashed once. The CB crackled despite being unplugged. "Kid, Mercury," my voice said calmly. "It's time to hand off the route." That phrase, it wasn't random. That was what my dad used to say when he was done for the night, and I took over the drive during our short runs. But it wasn't a memory. This wasn't comfort. This was something else, using that phrase to replace me. The panic broke through me like a dam snapping. I grabbed the ignition key, fired up the engine, threw the truck into gear, and tore out of that lot without checking mirrors, blind to whatever might have been chasing me. I got back on the highway and pushed the engine harder than I ever had. Faster than was smart, the roads blurred past. Mile markers I didn't recognize. Road signs that didn't match the map. I started seeing things in the ditches, reflections of headlights with no cars. Silhouettes holding microphones like dispatchers from forgotten decades. I stopped looking, just drove. After 20 minutes, I heard myself again. But this time, it wasn't a voice, it was a full broadcast. My voice on the CB, reciting traffic updates, weather conditions, jokes from an old logbook my dad used to keep. It sounded just like me. It even laughed like me. Other drivers were responding. Copy that, Mercury. Appreciate the heads up. Didn't think you were still running nights? I wanted to scream. I keyed into an alternate channel and tried to warn them. This is the real Kid Mercury. Don't talk to it. That's not me. Silence. Then a different voice, one I recognized. It was my father. Easy now, son. You're just tired. Don't fight the handoff. Just rest. You've earned it. He'd been dead for 2 years. I gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles cracked. You're not him, I said. You're not him. The voice didn't falter. I'm proud of you, you know. You've gone further than I ever did. You saw the whole route. That's rare. The cab filled with static. Not through the speakers, through. The air, it had weight to it. Pressure. Like the truck itself was being squeezed from the inside. My ears popped. My nose bled. Now I couldn't think. I couldn't remember why I was driving anymore. Then I saw the exit sign. Barstow, 3 miles. I didn't. Remember heading west. I'd been eastbound earlier. I didn't question it. I just took the turn and rolled the rig into town as the sky began to lighten with pre-dawn haze. I parked at the first gas station I found and collapsed across the front seat, shaking. My hands wouldn't stop. My teeth chattered. I stayed there until the sun was fully up, engine off, keys on the floor. Every piece of audio gear yanked and crushed under my boots. But as I stepped out, legs numb, eyes raw, I heard a final thing. Nearby trucker walked past me on the way to the pumps, smiled, nodded. Double quotes. Good to hear you on the radio again last night, Mercury. You sounded just like your old man. It's been 3 months since I left the road. I sold the rig a week after I got back. Didn't even haggle, just took the first lowball offer and handed over the keys like they were cursed.
Out the guy who
Bought it was young, eager, bright-eyed, in a way I used to be. I didn't say anything. What would I have told him? That the dashboard sometimes plays voices that aren't yours. That your reflection won't always move the way it should. You'll lose track of when you're speaking and when you're being spoken through. He wouldn't have believed me. I barely believe it myself some nights. The CB is gone. It's disconnected, packed into a box and left in the corner of a storage unit I no longer pay for. I don't think they'll mind. Something tells me the voice. We'll find another signal, another frequency. I haven't touched a mic since that night. I can't even listen to old tapes without flinching. I tried once, thought I'd digitize some of my dad's archive, preserve a little piece of his legacy. 5 minutes in, I heard my own voice say something I know I never said. He left the window open. That's all it took. I shut it down. Haven't opened the files since. I've heard from a few other drivers' old friends, radio regulars. Guys I haven't spoken to in years. So most of them are asking about Ronnie again. Apparently his voice is getting more active. It's not just on 19 anymore. People have heard him on shortwave, VHF, even coming through auxiliary input channels and newer. RIGS. One guy, Lou Crowbar Jensen. It's the same one who recorded Ronnie's last real broadcast, swears he heard his own voice answer. Ronnie, during a storm outside, Truth or Consequences, said it felt like a conversation he should have had, but never did. Said it felt like a test. They're starting to understand what I already know. It's not just mimicry, it's substitution. The voice doesn't want to trick you forever. It wants you to accept it. It wants in once it's inside. Your habits, your voice, your memory. It doesn't need the original anymore. I've been recording my own sleep just in case. So far, no talking, but last week I caught something else. In the background of a 5-hour clip, sometime around 2:12 a.m., there's a faint sound, a kind of static, but with shape, like syllables trying to form but falling apart at the edge of being spoken. Over and over again, a soft stutter. Mercury, ... Mercury, ... Mercury. It gets louder toward the end. By the final minute of the clip, it's not just sound anymore. It's words. Let me drive. I haven't listened again. I'm not sure I can. A few days ago, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a small, rusted CB, Michael style, from the 80s. The kind Ronnie would have used. Wrapped around the cord was a slip of paper torn from a notebook. It read, "The route never ends. Just hands off." That phrase, hands off, it's been eating at me. My dad used to write it in the margins of his logs. I never understood why, but now I think I do. I think it wasn't a sign-off. It was a warning. I've started seeing posts online and trucker forums, Reddit threads, deep-seated corners of the internet where voices are passed around like urban myths. People are hearing things, their own voices, their fathers, their friends. One guy said his GPS started rerouting him to places that don't exist on paper. Another said he arrived home to find a voicemail from himself, left an hour before. He made the call. It's spreading, but no one's doing anything about it, because no one knows what to do. How do you fight something that lives in your words? It doesn't need a body, just recognition. I tried to burn one of the tapes, took a butane torch to it, watched it melt into a black curl of plastic and smoke. Felt a little better for a few hours. But that night, my computer booted up on its own. No login, no prompt. Just a blank screen with a single line of text in courier font. Burning it won't change the route. I don't talk on the radio anymore. I don't speak much at all after dark. I keep my windows shut tight and my mirrors covered. But sometimes, when the world goes quiet and all the machines are off, I can feel it. It's just waiting. Waiting for me to start talking again. Because once you've answered, once the static learns your voice, it doesn't matter where you go. It's still listening. And it's learning how to drive. When you're broke and 21 with no job prospects and one semester of community college left, the idea of adventure doesn't mean hiking Europe or soul-searching through Asia. It means gas station food, half-baked plans, and the hope that anything you do will go viral. That was our mindset in the summer of 2018. Me, Tommy, Jules, and Rizwi were a half-functional pack of college burnouts with a dying group chat and a love for weird local legends. Tommy was the one who pitched it, of course. He always had a flair for finding exactly the kind of YouTube rabbit hole that left you sleeping with the lights on. But this time, it wasn't just another creepypasta or unsolved mystery thread. This one was close. Granite Hollow Quarry. That's what it was called. Just outside upstate New York, supposedly closed since the mid-70s after a string of teen disappearances. The kind of place with no real records, just whispers. Jules had seen a post about it years ago on a no-defunct Reddit thread. Blurry map, a few eerie photos of collapsed tunnels. And a voice clip someone claimed came from one of the lost kids' cassette tapes. The audio was almost unintelligible, just echoes and laughter, followed by screaming that didn't sound fully human. I remember the post's title, "They're Still Talking." That line stuck with us. The plan was ridiculous. Drive up film. The site make a documentary-style vlog series. Think BuzzFeed Unsolved, on a shoestring budget. But it had potential. We'd seen channels blow up on less. If we could get real footage and cut together a half-decent narrative, we could monetize it. Turn views into sponsorships. Maybe even dig ourselves out of the credit card pits we'd all quietly dug. Tommy even joked we could launch our own little ghost hunting brand. We weren't serious. Not really, when you're desperate. Everything sounds possible. We loaded up Tommy's old Jeep Cherokee with camping gear, 3 tripods, a drone. Riz borrowed from his brother, and enough instant ramen to survive a minor apocalypse. We left behind part-time jobs, ignored our texts from professors, and convinced ourselves this would be fun, kind of spontaneous, stupid thing you tell your kids about someday, if you're lucky enough to have them. I should have known better. The signs were all there. Tommy was obsessed, like more than usual. In the weeks leading up to the trip, he started texting us at 3 a.m. with links to old mining reports, pages from state geological surveys, even a screenshot of a supposed police dispatch from 1976 listing 3 missing miners at Granite Facility 17. That's what he called the place sometimes. Facility 17. Like the more clinical name made it sound real. Important. He started saying things like, "We need to go before someone else does." And there, trying to scrub it from search. Jules thought he was just being dramatic. Riz thought he was high. I didn't say anything. But then he found the tape. I still don't know how. He never told us. One day he just showed up at my apartment, wide-eyed, holding a weathered cassette and a portable player. He hit play without a word. The sound that came out was wrong. Not just creepy. Wrong. Like it wasn't meant for human ears. It was low, metallic. Like dozens of voices stacked on top of each other and pulled through a concrete tunnel. You couldn't hear what they were saying, but you could feel it. Like the words were vibrating in your teeth. Jules made him turn it off halfway through. She was pale and quiet the rest of the night. I remember Riz muttering, "That's fake," even though he looked like he believed it. I didn't sleep. I kept hearing it, even in silence. After that, the plan wasn't just a joke anymore. It was a mission. We were going to Granite Hollow. We were going to find the old quarry, film what we could, and maybe figure out what the hell was. On that tape, we left on a Tuesday morning. Weather was good, spirits were high. Tommy blasted a playlist of 2000s rock and weird field recordings as we drove, a mix he called Adventure Fuel. Jules brought her dad's DSLR. Riz had a GoPro mounted on his chest before we even hit the freeway. I was riding shotgun, checking maps and double-checking the coordinates Tommy swore were real. The closer we got, the more unstable the GPS became. Around Binghamton, it started freezing every few miles, would catch up, jitter, and then drop entirely. Jules blamed poor signal. Tommy said it was interference. I'm not saying I believed him, not then. But there was a moment about 30 miles out where I looked up from my phone and realized I hadn't seen another car for over an hour. No signs, no houses, just long winding roads through thick woods and hills that felt older than they looked. We passed a rusted sign bent nearly in half by a fallen tree. All it said was, "Nitrogen return access." We laughed, didn't turn back. We hit the outskirts of the quarry just after sunset. There was no welcome sign, no clear marker telling us we'd arrived. Just a chain-link fence, leaning at a crooked angle, and a gravel road that disappeared into dense woods. Tommy insisted this was the entrance he'd matched the landscape to a topo map from the 70s and cross-checked it with satellite images. It didn't look like much, just trees and hills and the faint outline of where heavy equipment might have once been dragged. But something about the silence in that place wasn't the calm kind. It was the kind that waits. We parked the Jeep just beyond the tree line on a patch of gravel, half swallowed by moss. Tommy was already out, pacing with his flashlight, muttering distances and directions under his breath, like he was trying to remember a dream.
Ow.
Riz pulled out the drone and started syncing it with his tablet. Jules and I stayed in the car a few minutes longer, watching the last light drain from the sky. She leaned toward me and said, "He's way too into this." I nodded, but I didn't answer, because she was writing, because I wasn't sure if that meant we should stop or double down. The plan was simple, at least on paper. Camp 2 nights. Near the base of the quarry, spend the first day scouting and shoot footage throughout. We had a checklist. Possible entrances to the mine tunnels, leftover mining gear, graffiti, abandoned signs, and of course, anything weird or out of place. Tommy even brought printed copies of the supposed missing persons reports and some police sketch that looked like it had been photocopied 100 times. He believed the kids who vanished didn't just disappear. He thought they were taken. We set up camp near what looked like an old service road. Tents on one side, gear on the other, with a small fire pit in the middle. Tommy ran around documenting everything: rocks, rusted tools, even the tree bark has, if the whole landscape might be trying to tell us something in code. Jules took still photos, silent and focused, already in her documentary headspace. Riz fiddled with gear settings and kept testing the audio levels on his mic, like he didn't trust the equipment to hold. I mostly stayed quiet. I was starting to feel it to the weight of the place. It's hard to describe, but there's a kind of heaviness in some locations. Not just physical, but mental, emotional. Like the trees are pressing in a little too tightly, like the air carries more memory than oxygen. The quarry had it in spades. That night, we sat around the fire, eating instant noodles and talking about the footage we hoped to get. Tommy wanted to stay overnight in one of the mine shafts just long enough to get raw environmental audio. Jules shut that down immediately. "We don't know how deep they go," she said. "You fall in, we can't get you out. No cell." Reception? Remember? She was trying to keep things practical. But I saw the unease in her eyes. None of us liked the idea of going underground. Still, we agreed to do a surface run in the morning. Tommy marked a few landmarks on a printed map. The old rail track, storage shed that might still be standing, and a cave-like indentation he referred to as Tunnel A. He'd highlighted it in red. He claimed that's where the voices on the tape got louder. I didn't ask how he knew. I think part of me didn't want to know. When we turned in, the night got strange. It was like the forest wasn't used to people anymore. Silence had an edge. Every snap of a twig or rustle of branches sounded sharper than it should. At one point I heard what I thought was laughter, just for a second off in the distance. I almost called out, thinking one of the guys had stayed up. But when I peeked out of my tent, everyone was zipped in. No movement, no voices, just trees. I crawled back in, heart racing a little, told myself it was nerves. The forest can do that, trick your ears, play with your thoughts. But as I was drifting off, I remembered something Tommy said earlier, half joking, half serious. He'd looked up from the tape recorder and said, "It's not the quarry that's haunted. It's us once we listen." I didn't sleep much after that. The next morning started to quiet. No bird song, no insects, just that same weight in the air. But we pushed through it. Tommy was up before any of us, already scouting with a GoPro, strapped to his chest and muttering into a handheld mic. His obsession had reached a new level. He wasn't just documenting now. He was interviewing the place like it could talk back. Jules caught him at one point standing completely still in front of a stone ledge, whispering questions like, "What did they tell you and why didn't they stop it?" She tried to play it off as method acting for the vlog, but even she looked rattled. We packed our gear and started filming near the perimeter. The path was overgrown, but Tommy led with purpose, saying it matched the old service map from '74. Riz flew the drone overhead, and we were all surprised to see just how massive the area actually was. From the ground, it looked like a tight loop of woods and old trails, but the drone feed showed layered pits like the quarry was tiered into the hillside. There were also strange indentations, almost like sinkholes or collapsed tunnels, but too clean, too deliberate. One of them looked like a spiral from above. Tommy called it the drain. Jules refused to film it. We spent the next few hours filming segments Staming narrating in front of the old rail tracks. Jules doing B-roll of the broken fence line, Riz capturing ambient sound. I did the field audio and kept track of time stamps. We worked well together, mostly. It felt for a little while like the start of something cool, like we were actually doing it, making something people would watch. There was even a moment around noon where we joked about coming back with better gear and doing a second season, but then things started shifting. It began small. Jules walked back to the camp to grab extra batteries. But when she returned 20 minutes later, she was convinced she'd been gone over an hour. Her phone's clock didn't match any of ours. Tommy joked about time dilation, but his laugh was tight. Then Riz swore he saw movement at the edge of the tree line, just a figure ducking behind a trunk, but when we ran over, there were no footprints. It's disturbed moss and something else. A clean, circular patch of stone like a floor tile buried in the dirt. It was warm to the touch. Later, while reviewing the drone footage, Riz found a 5-second segment that looked off. The drone rose above the quarry, then paused mid-air fine. But in the frame, we saw all 4 of us standing at the far edge of the quarry lip. The problem? We hadn't been at that spot all day? In fact, the angle was impossible. None of us had walked over there, and yet there we were. Or something that looked like us. We told ourselves it was a glitch, a reflection, a trick of the light. But that evening, when we went to check the area, we found 4 sets of boot prints, and 1 extra, smaller, barefoot. We didn't talk much after that. We ate in silence, the fire burning low. Jules started backing up footage. On her hard drive, whispering to herself about not losing anything this time, Riz sat with his headphones on, rewinding the tape from the drone over and over again, trying to match our positions. Tommy walked the perimeter alone. I think he was trying to catch something on audio, but every time I glanced at him, he looked more and more unsure. That night, I dreamt I was in the quarry alone, only it wasn't empty. There were voices. Just beyond the edges of the stone walls, and something was walking in the layers below me. Not running, or crawling. Just pacing. Listening. I woke up to find dirt on the inside of my sleeping bag, and in the distance, somewhere near the base of the quarry, we all heard it at once. Laughter, not close, not loud, but deep. The next morning was different. It wasn't just the cold or the heavy air, it was the way everyone moved. Slower, quieter, like we were all underwater. Jules barely spoke during breakfast. Riz had dark rings under his eyes and refused to talk about what he'd heard overnight. Tommy was already gone when we woke up. He'd left a note scrawled on the back of a paper plate. Found something. Near the lower pit, don't wait. There was no time, no marker, no real directions. It's just that. We packed up quickly and headed in the direction we assumed he meant. The lower pit was the deepest part of the quarry, and none of us had gone there. Yet, it wasn't easy to access overgrown trails, loose rock, and a strange fog that clung to the edges of the deeper drop-offs. As we descended, we noticed the drone wasn't syncing with Riz's tablet anymore. The feed kept glitching, jumping to earlier footage or freezing on still frames from the day before. At one point, it showed an image of the camp, but none of us were in it. It's just for tents, zipped with shadows inside. It's not moving. By the time we found Tommy, it was close to noon, but the light looked like dusk. He was crouched beside what looked like a small opening in the quarry, while less a tunnel, and more like a broken seam in the stone. Inside, it was pitch black. No signs of mining equipment, no tools. Just a narrow passage and a feeling that it went far. He looked at us and smiled, but it wasn't the usual Tommy smile. It was tight, mechanical, like he was trying to convince himself he was fine. He kept saying, "It's not on the map. That's why it matters. We didn't go in. Not yet." Jules flat out refused, and Riz had started to develop a constant tremor in his hands. Subtle, but there. I pulled Tommy aside and asked if he was okay. He nodded too fast, said he hadn't slept, but he felt like he was close to something. I didn't press, because truthfully, I was starting to feel it too, that weird pull. Like the quarry itself wanted us to find something, but wasn't going to make it easy. Back at camp, things got worse. Our gear wasn't where we left it. Some of the cables had been wound up and restowed in different containers. Riz's drone controller was missing its battery. Jules found her backup SD cards in the cooler, soaking wet. She swore she hadn't put them there. We all started arguing softly at first, then louder. Accusations, denials. Everyone was on edge. Tommy sat apart from us, listening to the tape again, not the cassette, the recording of the cassette we'd dumped onto his laptop. Only this time, it didn't sound the same. There were new voices. He played the clip out loud, even though Jules begged him not to. At first, it was that same layered murmur, the usual static and warped laughter, but then it changed. One of the voices said, "Don't leave the line." Then another, younger. One whispered, "It's your turn now." And then a voice that sounded exactly like Riz, repeating a phrase he hadn't said in days. "Get the wide shot." That shut everyone up. We didn't speak for hours after that. I took a walk to clear my head. Followed the same path we'd used the day before, just far enough to feel alone. That was a mistake, because the further I walked, the more I realized. The trail was looping. The trees weren't the same. There were markings on the trunk scratches, almost like tally marks, grouped in uneven clusters. Some had been filled in with charcoal. One set looked fresh. I started back and found myself in a part of the quarry I'd never seen. I could still hear our camp faintly, but the path between us was gone, just stone. And that's when I heard my own voice call out. Not an echo, not a hallucination. my voice down the slope, saying, "Over here. This way's faster." I didn't follow it. I ran. When I finally found the camp again, Tommy was gone. Again, Jules was crying.
Riz.
Had thrown his tablet against a rock. The battery was missing again. Everything felt off balance, like the center of gravity had shifted, and no one had told us. That night, none of us slept. The fire burned out sometime after midnight, and none of us moved to relight it. We heard footsteps, close ones. Outside the ring of light, they circled, sometimes paused, sometimes mimicked our breathing. At one point, I think something touched my tent. It didn't unzip it, didn't shake it, just brushed the side gently like it was checking to make. Sure, I was still there by the time the sun clawed its way back into the sky. We all looked like we'd aged a year overnight. Jules hadn't taken a single photo. Riz was refusing to touch his gear. I found Tommy staring at the quarry wall where the strange opening had been the day before, except now it was gone, or buried, or shifted. Just smooth, jagged rock. Ran his fingers over it again and again like he thought he could scratch the entrance back into place. He kept mumbling. It was here. It was right here. No one argued. None of us were in the mood to question what was real anymore. We decided to pack up and leave that afternoon. Even Tommy didn't fight it. Jules was already halfway through stuffing her sleeping bag into her backpack when we realized something else had gone missing, my digital recorder. The Zoom H4n we'd used for ambient sounds and backup narration. It was just gone. So I knew exactly. Where I'd placed it, zipped in my jacket pocket inside the tent. The jacket was still there. The pocket was empty. At first it felt like just another inconvenience until we noticed the tripod was gone too. And Tommy's pocket notebook, the one with all the notes, maps, timestamps. Then Jules said the thing none of us wanted to hear. "This isn't theft," she whispered. "It's selective." She was right. The battery's still there, untouched. Only our documentation was missing, our record of what had happened, what we'd seen. We decided to leave anyway. Whatever we hadn't caught on tape wasn't worth staying for. But the quarry had other plans as we hiked back toward the Jeep. We passed the old pit edge we'd seen from the drone, the drain, Tommy had called it. It had shifted, or opened. What was once a shallow depression now looked like a proper descent. Spiraling stone with moss-covered steps leading down. Something was glowing at the bottom. It wasn't bright, just a soft pulsing light, faint and white-blue like old halogen headlights in fog. But it wasn't natural. There was no power source. There's no reason for it to exist in a dead quarry with no electricity for decades. Jules froze. "That wasn't there before," she whispered, and she was right. None of us had seen it. And worse, there were footprints going down the spiral. Bare, small, human. We should have kept walking. But Tommy was already halfway down the path before anyone could stop him. He called back that he saw something, a box, maybe, or a crate wedged between two boulders near the glow. He bent to touch it, and that's when the sound started. It wasn't a scream or a growl. It was a replay. Like dozens of clips layered over each other, or voices played back out of order, distorted and sharp. Heard Jules saying, "Get away from it," and Riz laughing from 2 nights earlier, and my own voice whispering, "I don't think we're alone." It was like the quarry had recorded us. Like it had been listening. Tommy froze. Not from fear exactly, but like he was. Caught in a loop. He turned slowly, eyes unfocused, and walked back toward UA, still hearing voices, I think. He looked at me, then at Jules, then whispered, "They don't need the originals anymore." Then he passed out cold. We dragged him back to camp. Came to half an hour later, shaking, unable to form a full sentence. His pupils didn't match. Jules said he looked concussed. Riz checked his bag and found the missing recorder inside, but it wasn't empty anymore. It had one file on it, time-stamped tomorrow's date. We played it. It was the sound of all of us talking, walking, breathing. We could hear the conversation we'd just had about the pit. We heard Riz say, "I'll go down first," even though he never did. And we heard something else, a new voice layered in at the end, dry and quiet. "Tell the others. The drain is awake." After that, We didn't speak for a long time. That night, we didn't sleep. The lights returned slow, pulsing white orbs. Along the quarry ridge, blinking in patterns we couldn't follow, they hovered for hours, sometimes circling, sometimes dipping low enough to illuminate the stone in unnatural ways. They weren't drones. We checked. No heat, no hum, no noise at all. And sometime past 3 a.m., we heard the unmistakable click of a cassette being pushed into a tape deck, but none of us had a cassette player. By morning, everything had changed. It wasn't just that we were sleep-deprived or jumpy. It was the feeling like we'd already left and something had followed us anyway. Like we'd dragged part of the quarry into our own heads. When Jules unzipped her tent, she screamed. Her DSLR was gone, and in its place, sitting dead center on her sleeping bag, was a rock. Not just any rock flat, smooth with something etched into the surface in deep, deliberate gouges. It said, "You heard us. We tried to convince ourselves. It was a prank, some idiot locals messing with us." But there were no tire tracks, no signs anyone had entered camp. Besides, the rock was clean, freshly carved, and too large to have been dropped silently. That was just the beginning, when Riz tried to start the Jeep so we could finally leave. The ignition didn't even click. Battery completely dead. We opened the hood, expecting corrosion, or maybe a chewed wire, except the cables were gone. Cut clean and removed, not a shred of them left. Just open space where the wiring had been. Tommy kept asking over and over, how did they even know where to look? Jules wanted to hike to the ranger station we passed hours south on the drive-in, but Tommy shot that down immediately. It's not about distance, he said. Could walk for days and end up back here. Riz looked like he was going to punch him. What the hell does that even mean? He shouted. Are you listening to yourself? But deep down, I think we all understood. We weren't in the same quarry we entered 3 days ago, sometime after. Lunch. We heard the tape again, not from a device, just from the air. It was faint, carried on the breeze like some ghost frequency, but it was there. Our voices again, snippets of past conversations layered with distortion. We followed the sound to the far edge of camp and found something that should not have been there. The drone, Riz's drone. The one we lost to signal interference 2 days prior. But now it sat perched neatly on a boulder, camera lens cracked, and hanging like an eye half torn from its socket. Jules reached for it, and the second she touched it, the audio stopped. That's when we found the message. Carved into the inside of the boulder's shadow was a sentence. Barely visible, unless you were crouched low. It read, "Tell them to stop recording. Tommy insisted we keep filming anyway." "This is proof," he said. "They know we're here, and they're responding." But there was no joy in his voice. He sounded frantic, breathless, like a man who's already been told the answer and is just pretending to still have questions. The rest of us were done. Jules packed what was left of her things. Riz wouldn't say anything. I walked behind the tents to grab my sleeping mat and found something else, something I hadn't noticed before. Carved into the tree, just behind my tent, were 4 names. Ours, and beneath each one, a date. The date was today. I didn't tell anyone, not then. Around dusk, the lights came back. This time, they didn't stay distant. They dropped lower, hovering just above the treetops, then moving between them. Quiet, pulsing, deliberate. One light stopped above our dead campfire and just hung there, buzzing faintly, almost breathing, and then our gear started breaking. The camp stove hissed, sparked, and went dark. Jules's backup mic exploded with static, then silence. Riz tried booting the tablet again, and it flashed once, just a frame of the quarry spiral, except this time it was full. People figures standing in a perfect ring around the pit, faces blurred. Then it shut off forever. That night, we didn't light a fire. We stayed awake, sitting back to back in silence, jumpy at every branch crack, every shifting leaf. Tommy talked to the quarry under his breath. He kept whispering into his broken mic like he thought someone was still listening. And then, just before dawn, someone or something walked through our camp. We didn't see it. Didn't need to. Footprints told the story. Bare, wet, and wrong, like a child's. Only too long to narrow. No one moved, no one breathed. When the sun rose, there were no more lights, no more sound. Just silence, and the spiral path now wider, waiting. We left everything behind, except what we could carry. No one spoke a word as we broke camp. It felt like we were tiptoeing out of someone's house in the middle of the night, someone who was only pretending to be asleep. The spiral path behind us was wider than ever, carved deep into the quarry floor like it had always been there, like it had been waiting for a reason to open. None of us wanted to admit it, but it wasn't just a path anymore. It looked like a mouth. Riz was the one who suggested heading west instead of retracing our route. Right. His compass kept spinning, same with Jules's watch. We didn't know if we were walking in circles or if the trees really were changing around us. Everything looked familiar but wrong. Trees too close together, moss on both sides of the trunks, and no birds. Not even insects. It was like the whole forest was holding its breath, after what felt like hours. We hit the gravel access road different from the one we came in on, but real enough. There were beer bottles along the ditch, and a faded no trespassing sign riddled with buckshot, civilization. We followed it until we heard the sound of tires crunching over Roxanne old brown pickup. Dented, rust-streaked with a hunter. Behind the wheel, he slowed. When he saw us, didn't get out. Just looked at us through the window for a long time, before finally saying, "You came from Hollow, didn't you?" Tommy nodded. The guy didn't say anything after that, just pointed toward the back of his truck. "Get in. Don't say a word." We didn't. He dropped us at a gas station about 30 miles south. We must have looked like hell muddy, sunburned, shaking. Jules called her brother to come get us. Riz just stared at the payphone, repeating the phrase, "Tell them to stop," recording under his breath like a prayer. I asked the clerk if there was a ranger station nearby, and he looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "That quarry's been off limits since the 80s, he said. "Too many damn kids go missing." When we tried to file a police report, the deputy barely let us finish before interrupting. "There's nothing up there. No people. No caves. No lights. Y'all probably got turned around in the woods, got scared. It happens." Then he leaned in a little closer and said something I still can't shake, "But if you did hear anything, you keep it to yourselves. That place don't like attention." We went home. Jules deleted all her photos. Said she didn't remember taking half of them anyway. Riz sold all his gear. Every last cable, lens, even the drone which, by the time we unpacked, was gone again. Just vanished. Tommy never uploaded the footage. In fact, he won't talk about it at all. Moved to states over and stopped answering messages after a while. Last I heard, he was working night shifts at a radio tower outside of Ashland, Kentucky. Alone, he told me once, before we lost contact, that he still listens to the tape sometimes. Said there are new voices now. Said one of them sounds like me. As for me, I've tried to move on. But every few weeks I'll wake up to that old cassette hiss in my ears, even though I haven't owned a player in years. Sometimes I dream. I'm back in the quarry, standing on the spiral. And sometimes I dream I never left it. The last thing. 2 nights ago, I got a package, no return address. Just a padded envelope with one thing inside. My old Zoom recorder. The one that vanished. It had one file on it. Time-stamped for a day that hasn't happened yet. It ends with the sound of footsteps. A voice I know doesn't belong to any of us. It says, "Let them listen."